Vote and Board Member Rill. These are not in alphabetical order. Okay, she's not on. Board Member Booth. Board Member Bogus. Board Member Klein. Board Member Davis. Board Member Earl is here. Board Member Green. Board Member Hart. Here. Board Member Carey. Board Member Wood. Yes. Board Member Hymas. Yep. Board Member Lear. Yes. Board Member Norton.
Here.
Board Member Straight. Here. Board Member Moss.
Yep. Here.
Okay. Did someone online say here? Kristen did. Okay. So
Yeah, and I'm on my way in.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. We will go ahead and get started. Turn the time over to Superintendent Coleman. So go ahead.
Thank you. Our first item is a quick review and probably a motion on our funding request for the legislature. We have, after talking with board leadership, we have decided there's one item we can pull off and wait until next year to request, and that was the 9 deaf mentors for a total of $550,000. So you'll notice in your packet there's a strikeout through that line, and that will reduce the request by that much money. Board Member Earl, is there anything else you want to say
Yeah,
on that?
and I wanted to just talk to that a little bit more, just so that I think it's important that some of the mechanics of what we're asking for, that we understand that, and then we put the motion before the board. Sorry, let me get down to the item on here. Just a couple things to be aware of, I think, as we sat down with Board Member Joel, Superintendent Coleman, and just ask for some clarity on things. And as you look at the document itself, you've got the lighter colors, just so this is a reference for, both for public and also for board members. Those are positions that are being funded this year from carry forward funding, but will be needed in the next year. So if they're not funded next year, then not only the ones that are needed in the upcoming year, but also these items that are being funded this year will not have funding for those. Under the green section, we have IT staff and a financial analyst. And then also some things to be aware of. The school counselor had previously been funded by ESSER funds, so we have a position there that we're using, and that it was funded by ESSER, that will, when the ESSER funds dry up, that person will no longer be there, and this individual has been highly successful. The other items I think of are in interest both to the public and I think board members are that there's a number of positions we are now required to have, and those positions are related to falling a district that falls below the 3% threshold. And we had one of those districts this last year fall below that threshold, and that's Twilla. And there are 5 positions that we're offering services needed for those individual students in those areas that are now required, that we would be taking those on because they fall under the 5%. Let's see, was there any other items, Joel, that we talked about that we missed? And then it would be removing the 9 or the deaf mentors and allowing those to be funded somewhere else. And that would be the action that comes before us. There is discussion going on in law and licensing, and you've heard some public comment about it. We'll meet with some districts over the next little bit and kind of see where we can land on this. If we're not able, the legislatures, we're looking at where can we get funding for some of these positions if the legislature's not, if they're not going to be able to, fund the positions that are needed. Mm-hmm. So it's just a discussion around the possibly 25% of the cost associated with students that are the schools that fall below the 3%. And once again, that's an open discussion. There's not, we're trying to find where the balance is and trying to meet the needs of local districts. Without these positions, we've got students that will not receive the same level of services that they've been able to receive, or districts will need to pick those up themselves that fall below the 3%. So there's kind of a give and take there, and trying to find that right balance. Whether or not 25% is the right balance, I'm not sure, but we're hoping to carry on some additional dialogue. I look forward to hearing what the discussion was from Finance Committee, because they had it in their committee, or at least a discussion part of that today. So I'll leave it at that. And if there's someone that'd like to make a motion, just so that we can amend this, so that as we go before PA or other elected bodies and they're asking, we can say this is where we're landing at this point. So I'm looking for a motion for a modification to the funding request.
I can make that motion.
Okay. And the motion, you want me to say what the motion is?
You gotta put it up on the screen, one of the two. I make a motion for modification of the funding request.
Oh, yeah. To strike the deaf mentor, right, to remove that from the funding request. Yeah. Oh.
Oh.
There we go. Do you see it,
Yep,
Joe?
the recommended action.
Yes.
Yep, make a motion that the board approve USDB's legislative funding request for 38.6 ongoing FTE needs and paraeducator benefits for 20 of 66 full-time assistant teaching faculty.
Okay. Was that accurate? And it wouldn't be accurate anyways. It's not 38. What am I missing? This is the original. And we're modifying the original motion. Is that what you're saying? We're amending it? Yeah, which would drop the number of, it would no longer be 38. It would go down to 30? Okay, that's what I'm saying, that we no longer have we've got to have the accurate information up there. So 38 would drop down to 30. Is that an accurate number then, 30? 30.6 or 30? 30.
You could simplify the motion by saying,
Just strike
just to modify what was approved before by striking the deaf mentors.
Okay. So
I'm not a board member.
is someone
so-
driving?
No, I just want to make sure I get the language right.
Yeah, I think it could be just to amend the previously approved motion,
Yes.
right? To remove the deaf mentors, the 9 deaf mentors. That's what,
Okay, then I'd like to make a motion, and that would be to amend the previously approved application to remove the deaf mentors.
okay, do I have a second? Second. Okay, there's a second on any discussion on this item? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote then. If the motion before the board is to amend the previously approved funding request to remove the 9 deaf mentors from the funding request. And who do we have online? Hey, Kristen, are you in favor? Do you want me to restate it? She was coming in.
Yes.
Okay, she is. Okay, so whoever, Board Member Straight, as soon as it comes up, will you vote for her? I mean, will you indicate her vote? Oh, we'll just do we'll do a vote. Nope, we got it. Okay, Board Member Rill. Board Member Booth. Hold on. Board Member Klein. Board Member Davis.
Since I just walked in on this, I'm going to abstain this time.
Would you like me to restate the motion?
No, I can see it on the board, but in light of our discussion
Okay,
this morning, I'm not
perfect.
sure where it all falls out. So for now, I'm going to just abstain.
That's not accurate. We're amending it to remove the 9 deaf mentors so that the USB is going to cover that cost, and we're not asking for those this year.
I know, but even if we...
Okay, that's okay, you can abstain. Vice Chair Earls, a yes. Board Member Green, we didn't. Board Member Hart?
Yes.
Hymas, Board Member Hymas? Board Member Carey? Board Member Lear? kind of weak yeses there, guys. Board Member Norton, you were a yes already, right? That's what we'd heard. Board Member Rill? Board Member Straight? Board Member Straight? Okay. Board Member Wood? Yes. Board Member Chair Moss?
Yes.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in favor. And I think there were 2 abstentions. Is that what you had? Okay. Okay.
Okay. Just as a point of information for board members, as the board considers the 3% rule, this may be modified downwards significantly again. But for now, if nothing changes in board rule, then this is the request that will go to the legislature.
That's accurate. And we may have to discuss that on PEA this week, so thank you for the timeliness. Okay.
Oh,
ahead
also,
with the
I
next
forgot to
item.
mention, if it's all right, Madam Chair,
Yes.
Susan Patton is out of town at a conference, and so Erin is here representing her, and Erin is the director of our deaf-blind programs.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
And she knows everything about the blind school, so if you have lots of questions today, would be the time to ask them.
Perfect. I think we'll all keep that in mind, put her on the spot. Okay, what is next on our agenda here?
The
Annual report. Thank you. And Michelle Tanner, Associate Superintendent of the Deaf School, you'll be presenting that, is that right?
So while you're pulling that up, Michelle, just to remind board members, each year the legislature requires us to submit an annual report. And so this comes to you in your October board meeting, and then it goes to the Public Ed Appropriations Subcommittee in their prior to their November meeting. They used to have us actually report in person, but that law was amended several years ago, and so we just submit it to them now. And this also becomes the basis for our presentation during the legislative session when we present any funding requests, and that is our time kind of in person to go over what the trends are. This year, you're probably going to be more familiar with some of this already because the last several months, as you know, we've been showing you graphs about our growth and other things as we've struggled with how to successfully execute all of the components of the mission that you've given us. And so I've asked Superintendent Tanner and Erin if they will kind of review the Deaf and the Blind School annual report with you today.
Okay. All right. Let's start at the very beginning with the student demographics. I think those are the questions we get the most asked about. We're going to focus on a lot of visuals here, so you don't have to, if you want to, you can read the text. So total students that we served in outreach, PIP, our campus programs is 2,662 students throughout the state. 369 of those students were on our campuses. That 369 represents enrolled students, the highest number of enrolled students at any given campus, so that we have that as our grand total. So 369. Our number of teachers throughout the state, this is our educators, are 200. We have a 1-to-5 ratio, and that is in line if we're getting our reports back from Dickinson's and from HOK, the people who've been studying our buildings. They validated that our number of 1 to 5 is actually a good, solid number in comparison to other deaf schools, a 1-to-5 ratio, deaf and blind schools. So we have 43 related service providers. That's OT, PT, speech, psychology, those kind of things. Support staff would be your aides, your interveners, deaf mentors, anyone who provides support to the classroom, and that's throughout the entire state. Administration, we have 23 administrators, supervisors, that's business office, that's everyone within USDB who's got different roles. 25% of our students are economically disadvantaged. Of the 100% of students we have, 86% of them are on an IEP. The remaining students are on a 504, and we have a very, very small number of siblings, like in preschool, And we've had one family who took advantage of the addition of siblings. I think we have one in EDS. And then graduation, we had all of our 10 students. We had 100% graduation. And there are 85 transportation routes that take students to and from one of our 4 campuses. That's also in St. George. It's growing. For just as an information to see where these students are, and this includes our PIP and our outreach and our campus students. This is where they are by county. So you can see where the larger numbers are, and you can see where we don't have some kids, some more rural area parts of the state. And you can see why the numbers are growing, and like, for example, on the deaf school, why we're asking for support down in St. George, because these 2 counties need more support. Yeah.
Can I interrupt with a question? What's the blank
Yes.
spot on the map? Did I miss something?
Oh, that's a county that doesn't have any students deaf or
None?
blind. Yep.
Oh.
It's
Pretty rural.
rural, very rural. So here's breakdown. We take that 2,662, and you can see where they're at. So you can see how we've got a large majority of them are in PIP. And we've got the classroom and then the outreach students. The PIP program, just as a way of information, because we're working with the health department and we are the people who provide deaf and blind services to any child that's 0 to 3, that there are more students that qualify for services in that age group, but once they hit school age, there are some that do not qualify, and that's why you'll see a difference sometimes in those numbers. If you look at that 2,662, you can see how that's appropriated across the state, both with PIP, classroom, and outreach. We have 60% of those students are deaf and 40% of those students are blind or have a vision loss. This is also another breakdown of that. You can kind of see those comparisons, so you can break them down specifically between deaf and blind and classroom, PIP, and outreach. So that this is another way to basically look at it. Now, if you look at our services, though, and that's often something we get asked about, the number, even though there may be 2,662 students, they require a lot of services. A deaf child, for example, may require a teacher of the deaf, an interpreter, an audiologist. They may even still need OT or PT, things like that. And on the blind side, they may need O&M services. They may also have a teacher of the visually impaired. They have a lot of different services that they get. So that's 6,415 services that are provided to students with a sensory loss across the entire state. As you can see, the bulk of those are audiological services because we support the districts in doing their analysis of those students. And so there are students out there that we provide FM systems for that makes it very helpful, and then our teachers of the deaf just check and see how they're doing. 369 students, you can see where that is broken out on our campus. So the bulk of our students are on the Jean Massou School campus, and then there's KBS as our next, and EDS. Then it breaks down even further. Most of the blind students, as you are aware, are in an outreach capacity, and not as many are on campus, whereas the deaf school has more students on campus. This is an information item that we have been focusing on. So this focuses on the type of disabilities that we have. So you can see over the years, you can see from 2013 to now, that the fluctuation, the blue is all the deaf students, and these are on campus. These are on campus. The red are all the blind students. We have some deaf-blind students that are also present on our campus programs. And then you can see the multi-disabled students there. And actually, if we pulled this out, you'd see that the multi-disabled students are actually growing. And we have a few peers that participate. That's the orange. So it kind of, you can see the breakdown of the disability categories. When asking about our educators, so we shift, instead of focusing on the kids, now we focus on the educators, you can see where the educators are located. We took those 200 educators and spread that out, and you can see by the numbers where the educators are located and how many we have in each area. And that's what this graph displays. And then our years of experience, really proud of our years of experience. So we have 44% of our teachers have more than 16 years of experience. When they come here, if we can just find them, they're highly specialized, but once we get here, they like to stay here. It's a very fulfilling and rewarding position. It's good to be exhausted for all the right reasons at the end of the day, and so teachers stick around here. So we've got a lot of experience here at the Schools for the Deaf and the Blind. You also can see we have a lot of education. Most of them have master's degrees. So 172 have master's degrees and 11 of them have doctorates. So we have 183 of the 200 that have those levels, and the rest have bachelor's degrees. This is often tracked, at least for Schools for the Deaf, to know how many deaf teachers you have, because we highly value that the children have an opportunity to see someone who is like them. And so you can see how many are deaf and how many are hearing. And we even added a little bit here on USB on the blind side. They actually have 4 educators that are also deaf. So that's the numbers of where they are at each campus last year for how many are deaf, how many are hearing. You can see we've got quite a few hearing, not as much deaf. We'd sure love to have more deaf people involved. Now we're going to talk about the programs. I'm going to focus on the deaf school programs, and then I'm going to turn the time over to Director Frere so that she can talk about the blind school. This is our last picture of our last graduation. 100% of the kids graduated deaf and blind school. What a cute crew they are. We love them every year. I know we say this, but really is the most pleasurable graduation you could ever attend. The kids are amazing and quite funny sometimes. So of the deaf students, that's 1,596. You can see how that breaks down for us. Most of them are in PIP. We have 317 that were in classrooms, and 551 were in the outreach. I often get asked the modality, whether they're using sign language or listening to spoken language. It would be great if we didn't have to do this all the time, because that we would just be okay. But it's an ongoing discussion, so we put this out there. In the outreach, the students across the state, the students are being served out there. Most of them are listening and spoken language students, or students who use speech and hearing to communicate and don't know sign language. And so they need support through FM systems, hearing aids. A teacher they're deaf, make sure they're getting access in the classroom where they're sitting, that things are adapted for them. And then I have 5% or 25 kids that have an interpreter, and they're in a mainstream classroom out in the outreach.
Can I interrupt?
Mm-hmm.
This is important when we get questions from legislators on saying, well, why can't we just push these students back to their regular schools? Why do you need more space on your campuses? This demonstrates that most of the students are in their local schools. It's only those who really need a campus that we have, and that's the group that drives that need.
And you'll see that they are choosing to be on campus, to be with one another. That's what the right graph will show you. Most of the students on campus for the deaf school are students that use American Sign Language and cleave to the associations and the socializations that they get at school to have a full, robust discussion with their classmate, with their teachers, and everything is geared toward their understanding of a hearing loss and how we interact with one another. So that's most of the students on campus are ASL English. We have most of these LSL students that you see are in our preschools, in our preschool program, and I have a graph that kind of shows that. But these are students who use spoken language. And a lot of those students, after they're in our preschool programs, go out back into their outreach courses. And so they'll end up on the other graph at some point. Our parent-infant program, I'm going to scroll through all the text, and you're welcome to read that. Our parent-infant program, we saw the numbers on there, but it talks about how we do interventions one-on-one. We're in the homes. We often have story groups. We have activities we do with them. A toddler group, I attended the toddler group this week, and they get families together, moms and dads sitting on the floor, interacting with the kids, helping them to understand how to communicate with their child, so they have a better outcomes down the road. And there is a lot to say about early intervention. That's where the deaf mentors are helping, is in the parent-infant program. They go into the homes and teach the parents sign language so they can communicate with their child, and it takes 7 years to become fluent, and that's dedication to become fluent in sign language. And so we want the parents to get that fluency as soon as possible so they can have the normal conversations that parents have with their children. And that can be really critical as they get into teenage years, and you've got to have really critical conversations. You hope you're fluent by then. This is our preschool. I was talking about modality. I want you to note something. I've done this graph for many years, and I'm always pleasantly surprised as these last few years. We had a lot of grief at the beginning when we said we would like the listening and spoken language students and the signing students to collaborate. That means the parents can say they're going to go over here for this time and they're going to go over here for this time. All we need is the teachers to work together so that we can coordinate this for the child. Well, that was a real struggle. I think many of you may not have been there at that time. It was a real struggle, and there was a lot of angst about that. Now that this has become more of a commonality here, and as you saw in our accreditation, it's something that is not common amongst the United States, and we get a lot of recognition that we've been able to achieve this because it's been going for a long time, for many years, that these groups do not get along. Well, this is a good graph to show you how it's being played out. So the dual, those are parents who have said, I want my child learning both. I want my child to learn American Sign Language. I want them to learn listening and spoken language, and they're going to go between the two programs. That piece of the pie has grown significantly over the years, and it keeps getting larger. And so the ones that just want signing only, the parents have chose. There are 9 students, and there are those who have said, nope, I just want a listening and spoken language approach, and that's 33 students. Those students tend to be more hard of hearing and will likely end up back in their home school because that would fit them in their approach. But the other 62% would most likely stick with us and get both services. And there's the preschool kids. They are the cutest kids. They say the cutest things. Don't walk in there with anything wrong, they will tell you. Yep, they're pretty. So last year we had 364 students that required an interpreter. We had 48 USDB interpreters. We actually didn't use as many as we had in the past. If we mainstreamed all the kids that you see at our campus programs, 369, the cost right here would be extremely high because all those 369 kids go to a different school, different age group, different district, everywhere. I'd have to provide an interpreter for each child around there. There would be closer to around 300 interpreters that I would need to provide that service because those 369 use an interpreter. So if I send it to one school district in elementary class and I'm a 5th grader, even if I'm in the same school, I'm going to have to send another interpreter to interpret for the other child in the other classroom. So there is a great cost savings that's not seen in just having the kids together, getting direct communication, which is far better for them anyway, than it is sending them back out to districts. This tells you where they're at, whether they're Salt Lake, North, Southern, and whether they're getting a group interpretation. You'll notice, and what you'll see in the blue, that's mostly our campus programs. So all those students, if we go somewhere, they'll get an interpreter for those events. For the most part, we don't have interpreters in the classroom. This is for when they go to events, they go to field trips, interact with a hearing group. And then this is another way of showing it where those are located. So, as we showed up above, 2,936 services are given to students through audiology. This is how they do it. These are the 1,613 are the ones throughout the state that are getting regular services. That we go check on them. Sometimes their hearing aids are working. Sometimes their cochlear implant is having a problem. Sometimes their FM system is having an issue. So they go and they regularly, or they come in for a booth testing because their hearing loss is fluctuating. So those are regularly served students. Then we have we just go in and do a hearing evaluation, assist the districts with those so that we can decide if there's a hearing loss for a student or not. So those are the testings. Checking their hearing aids and cochlear implants specifically to get them a new hearing aid, give them ear molds, those kind of things. And then the yellow, it's hard to see, it says HAT or FM systems. Those are hearing assistive technologies. So this right here that I've got in front of me would be an assistive technology device right here. This right here would count. Only these are often personal, or they'll set them up in classrooms as a sound fill system. And that's what one of those are. And, we do a lot of assessments, and you can see I just listed them out. there are a lot of assessments that we do on our students. They get assessed on so many things. Unfortunately, we can't show you a broad graph that shows all of these assessments because these are individualized to the child, and it would be disclosing personal identifiable information. Plus, they are very unique. So the ones that we've tried to get that are to have every student take is the receptive picture vocabulary test and the expressive picture vocabulary test. We've noticed that you'll notice the blue pretty much only goes to kindergarten. And that is because once you start using sign language, those receptive vocabulary tests, the scores are skewed because these tests are not developed for deaf children. There just aren't assessments that are normed on deaf children. And so we have to take what is normed and adapt it. And all of these tests must be interpreted with that frame of reference, knowing that everything is not quite right. It's not exactly intended for this purpose. So you can see their scores. A score of between 85 and 115, because these are standard scores, is a good score. If I go down on each one of these individual kids, we have what's called growth data, and we can tell whether they've grown or not by how this standard score goes up. So as you grow, you gain 1 year's vocabulary growth with 1 year's time, and they have numbers for that. So they're making great progress. This is our MAP testing. We do the MAP, the Measures of Academic Progress. This is a test that most schools for the deaf across the nation are using. We are going to talk to them about how we can use data from all the other schools to create some norms so we can see how our students are created with norms. At this point, this is growth data of how they're growing. This is overall for reading. We've got some kids that are in the red that are struggling. The orange kids are making better progress, yellow even better, and of course blue is accelerating way beyond what they need to. I just want to point out, as you look at all these graphs, you can go by grade, so you have all the details. You can go by grade. You have to really interpret any of this data with great caution, because if you'll notice, this may be 5 students, 4 students in some cases. You really should be not making judgment calls without more than 100. You need some more data. But we only have such small amounts of students at each grade level that makes that really difficult to extrapolate the data to make other things. We know these students, we know them individually where they're at, but the numbers on the side here on the right, you'll notice, are very small. And so you can see there's the data for language use, and one by each grade level of the grades that took the test. And math, we have scores for math. 130 students participate in those assessments. And then we have, and you can see, like, for example, this right here, this grade 8, we had some students, and those are students that 8, it doesn't surprise me because those are students that have multiple disabilities. And we do have quite a few of those. Science, and this is how we compare, though, to the average on those scores. So to take that data, MAP gives us some data on the hearing average. So the blue is our students for each grade level. The orange is the national average. So you can see that we're close, but not quite there with some of the national averages on the different graphs. I'll do quickly on the extracurricular programs. We had, these are all the students that we had. We had 140 after-school activities, 58 at EDS, 27 at KBS, and 58 at JMS. We had 50 summer camps, which is amazing. And we're offering 4 sports right now for our students, and we had over 190 students participate in just the summer school activities. And then 32 of the students are participating in basketball, volleyball, football, and things like that. It also has a list here of all the different activities. We already went through that last month, but all the different activities that we have done this past year with our students. We try to get them involved in as many things as possible so they're not sitting at home on their devices. With that, I'm going to turn the time over to Director Frere, and then we'll take questions at the end unless you want to ask them now.
Well, we can take questions at the end. I'm not seeing any, so.
Okay. Got one.
Let's do that.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Just one back to student counts, and we may have covered this because it relates to some of the other development work. The in-campus student count, did we have the projection on that on growth of that number, 300 and something or other, right?
We do, but that's not part of the annual report. This is
Okay.
just last
All
year's
right.
information.
Yeah, okay. Well, it raised the question because I know that's part of the ongoing. This is extremely helpful because you see how many services, how many kids. That in-campus piece is what's, being looked at for facilities and other stuff, right? So that's a separate thing. Okay.
I should also note that on the studies that were conducted about the campuses, they have projections in there on both reports, on
Okay.
projections on things like that and what they expect. They, in fact, I think one of them projected out to 2040. And so
Okay,
I think
and
we'll
that's-
have that when you read the reports.
That's based on discussions with you guys. I don't want to get too far afield, but it kind of, this is a great picture of where we are. And then that raises the question of where we're going, right? So
Yes.
there's those studies that they've done with projections are based on some good dialogue with you guys. That was part of the early question on that is,
Yeah.
are they deep in your weeds as opposed to generalities or
And-
other states or whatever? Okay.
And they did compare to other states. So
Yeah,
they
which is
compared our
helpful,
growth, and then they
but-
talked with other states about, and so they did a comparison. It was really nice, at
Okay.
least so far,
They
as
got
far
in the
as I've
weeds.
read.
I'm going to
Got in
address,
the weeds with you
I'm going to
guys,
address a little
your
bit of that in the
people. Okay.
superintendent
Thank you,
report
I got
at the
it.
end.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for having me here. I know I am no replacement for Susan, no one is, and she sends her regrets, but I'm excited to talk to you about the blind school. So last year, USB includes 4 different divisions. We have the early childhood division, we have campus programs, outreach vision services, and deafblind services. In addition, USB also works hard to provide resources and supports to students, families, and TVIs statewide, utilizing our assistive technology team, providing low vision services through our resident optometrist, and many professional development opportunities. We also provide expanded core curriculum programming throughout the year in the form of summer camps, family events, short-term programs, and more. So the first division we're going to talk about today is our early childhood division, and that consists of both the parent-infant program for the blind and visually impaired, like the deaf and hard of hearing has, and then we also have a home-based, which is a home-based early intervention program, and then we also have our on-campus preschool program, which houses programs in both Ogden, Salt Lake, and Springville on those 3 campuses. And so I'll go more in depth a little bit on our reporting from last year on each of those. Our parent-infant program is a year-round program that actually houses 16 providers that served 563 children last year. And that number includes ongoing caseloads as well as 315 new referrals from this last fiscal school year. Numbers fluctuate quickly in PIP. However, the monthly enrollment reports show a very steady increase in PIP's daily enrollment numbers. All right, and the graph you see, I don't know if, oh yeah, this is it, perfect. So the graph you're seeing now reflects the number of skills that were assessed, that were gained per month of service department-wide using the Insight evaluation. So it breaks it down by skills gained, and so you'll see we have some good growth there. And then moving on to our preschool program, so it includes 5 educators and 9 classroom aides, which provide instruction for, it fluctuated from 20 to 26 students throughout this school year across those 3 campuses as well. And this first table that we have here reflects the gain by domain for preschool children who had the Insight testing assessed from fall to spring, and then the second one is an average gain in months for the school year by domain as determined by the Oregon assessment. Moving on to our campus programs, last year it consisted of classrooms from kindergarten to post-high school on our 3 different campuses. And for that school year, USB's growth percentage of the Unified English Braille Code, or the UEB, was 18% for Braille reading and writing from fall to spring. In addition, we have increased our focus on expanding students' skills in assistive technology and in the college employment transition process. And that's what that graph was that you just saw. This is our second year using the gloss numeracy assessment to identify grade levels and content. And on average, our students decreased about 6% based on data from our fall to spring assessments. And then moving on, our campus programs educate students with complex needs who are assessed using a variety of different assessments, kind of like Michelle mentioned. And we have some data here from last year based on the assessment data from the expanded core curriculum competency rubric. There was a gain of 1.25 levels of progress, which exceeded the expectations for the year. So we're really excited about that. And this data is also represented in a graph right there that you can see. All right, moving on to our assistive technology team is the AT team, or AT team, not the AT, the A team. Yeah, the AT team is primarily based on our Ogden campus, but serves students throughout the state. So there are 6 members of the team that offer training, support, consultation, and provide access for students in the form of 3D printed models, PVC play gyms, and high-tech devices such as Braille note takers and screen reader technology. And during this last 23-24 school year, the high-tech team offered 37 comprehensive consultations to educators, which was an increase from 22 from the 22-23 school year. And the high-tech team completed 406 hours of student and TSVI technology instruction, which is fantastic. I'm really excited to be able to present on that. Our low-tech accessible learning materials center completed 1,450 orders in the 23-24 school year. This is an 80% increase in orders since our ALMC, or the Accessible Learning Materials Center, inception in the 21-22 school year, which again I think is pretty fantastic. An 80% increase is incredible. I feel like I'm presenting to Shark Tank or something. Like, here's our data, sharks, and this is how we're great.
These pictures, I just wanted to put these pictures up above. These are personalized materials they're creating. So these things don't exist elsewhere. Our staff creates that. I mean, they're very creative, but they look at the child's needs and they make this. I'm so impressed.
Right.
With what you guys do and what you put out there. That little child, they made that just for that little child, the little keyboard, that's just for him. And it's sometimes we most likely often use a 3D printer, but there's so many other ways. They're so creative. They're amazing people. That's why it's gone up.
They really are.
Makes a huge difference.
I see it often, and it's not just for students who are blind or visually impaired. Our deafblind students, I have teachers of the deafblind who've tried everything to support a need for a student in the district, and then they come to our low-tech team and say, okay, here's what we've got going, and they just get to work right away and produce what we need to help support our students. And from adaptable calendaring systems to wheelchair assistive devices for technology, it's pretty fantastic. So very, very individualized. And let's see, so the USB Assistive Technology team offered AT cohorts this year, where they created and provided 16 sessions of professional development, which comprised of 4 advanced AT topics to support the teachers for students with visual impairments throughout the state of Utah. Overall, over 5,000 minutes of PD were provided through these cohorts. Moving on to our expanded core services team, they provided activities related to the ECC, the expanded core curriculum, to students who are blind or have low vision throughout the state. There were over 500 registrations received for these activities, which is really impressive to have that many families involved throughout the state. USB's outreach service is a statewide program that provided 451 TSVI services and 346 O&M, orientational mobility services, to students in school districts and charter schools throughout the state last year. And that was through direct service and also consultative services.
Could you go back to that prior slide? I just wasn't finished reading.
Jerry's gonna turn on the overhead microphones, and we'll just work with that while we're working this out. I can talk really loud.
Will the one next to it work?
Yeah.
She's using
None of them. None of them work.
The whole system is.
Oh, I'm turned on. Do you want to come use mine? Why don't you come up here? It's my lucky day.
Already put her on the spot. Now
Okay, I'm already done, or I'm almost done, not already. Okay, so are we good to continue? Okay, great. So let's see, I'm just trying to make sure I've got, okay, we talked about the expanded core curriculum. So USB's outreach service, we talked about the 455 TSVI services and 346 O&M services. And the graph that you see that Michelle will show shows the percentage growth as identified by the Jerry Johns assessment. That was administered once in the fall and once in the spring to students. And the graph is separated into reading modalities. So it shows the percentage growth for primary Braille reading fluency, which increased just over 8%. The secondary Braille reading fluency, which increased a little over 42%, and then large print reading fluency, which increased over 13%. And also, this is what I'm most excited to talk about because this is my division. Deafblind Services is also a statewide program, and we fall under the School for the Blind, and we served last year 142 students, utilizing 15 teachers of the deafblind and 46 interveners, 3 of those being benefited interveners. And this program is for students who experience combined vision and hearing loss. And there really is no single assessment that's been deemed appropriate for all students with deafblindness, nor are there standardized tests out there for students who are deafblind. But the most common assessment that we utilize is the communication matrix. And this just helps us to guide where students are accessing communication and where they are communicating. And Teachers of the Deafblind reported that the communication matrix was applicable for 95 of those 145 students. And then of those 95 students, 82% were assessed twice, once in the fall and then again in the spring. And the average score improvement was 3 points, which can be seen. That's what the graph reflects in our section. And then last but not least is USIMAC, and that's our State Instructional Material Center. And this is actually the first time that we're reporting on USIMAC in our annual report. For the last few years, just to give you paint a picture, USIMAC has served an average of 182 students per year and has created an average of 1,462 books for those students. USIMAC measures its success by tracking how many orders are sent to students on time. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. The USIMAC performance measure was set at 70% of orders fulfilled on time, and that means that the students would have those materials to use for their classes on the first day of school. And you can see in the graph, perfect. You can see in the graph that in 22 and 23 school year, we were just shy of the 70% goal and for performance measure, and coming in at just over 66%. But this last school year, the 23-24 school year, we jumped up to just under 81%, which is a huge increase. Thank you. And how did we do that? Well, USIMAC currently employs 37 individuals, which 4 of those include new positions that were hired in the spring of 23. Susan really wanted me to make sure I drove this home. She wanted you to hear about that 10% gain across all of USIMAC, which is inclusive of both large print and Braille materials. And in fact, the on-time Braille material actually increased to 89%, but this graph is showing a combination of both that large print and Braille. So we're very excited about that. And that's all I have. If there are questions, I will probably defer them to Susan, which she can get back to you, but I'd be happy to answer or try if there are any questions.
know, I don't know if there's a mic or not. I just was wondering,
It's,
well, I did, and it
Well,
just
hold on.
flashed.
it's only but the overhead's on, so.
The overhead's on so they can hear me. I just was curious, I know, was it last year, a couple years ago, that, I think Jenny talked about bringing in some machine, I know it was like a board effort. Hopefully that has helped. in
Absolutely it
this,
has.
And that we're taking steps in the right direction.
Yes.
It obviously looks like it, the data's showing that, so I appreciate that.
But
Thank
they
you.
use Cymax different.
Okay.
Sorry,
So that's what I'm wondering.
yeah, they actually take the equipment and can interpret, like, make sure it's working, and then they can check it out. The Cymax itself, where do you got? You got it for me? Okay, there's a whole pile of books there. What they do is they take the actual book and they create a braille or a large print of it. So that's what they do, and it's actually, if you haven't been there, it's an incredible process. But it's a little bit different dynamics, although they still do they use the, what do they call them that we bought?
The brailers.
The brailers,
Yeah.
and they can take those out, but that's not really, the main work they
Okay,
do
so
is
it's a little
taking
different. Okay.
student content that's gonna be used in their class and then making it usable for the student.
Right, and this is providing services to every student in the state of Utah who needs the large print or
Which
braille.
normally, is it January or February?
Yes.
The next year, they actually have to submit a request and the materials for the students, so they have enough time. It takes months and months, because they have, anyways, it's an interesting process. If you get a chance, go see it. But, yeah, but that is part of it, but a very small part.
And these resources that are going around are actually from Kids Read Now. They wanted to share an example of what they were sending out to our students in their free books that they send out each year. This is the sample that will be going to but it's an example. If you look at the one that Member Green has, this is what you see from USIMAC. If you go there, you take a science book, and it's like an entire shelving unit long, broke up into chapters for a science textbook.
And can I add to that? These books that I was just looking at right here are very similar to the books that are included in my grade levels, their reading program. And these are the books that they don't want to just read it during reading, they want to read it during free reading time. Because these kids, so many of these, all of Utah students, love informational reading. They love reading about science and social studies, but they want it brought into them in a fashion that they like. And so the chunks of information and the text features are so wonderful. So it just thrills me to see that avenue is opened up to all students.
And it's fascinating to see what they do with maps, because they have to do specific things. It's not just the words, right? You have to have, so if it's a map of Utah, they have certain symbols that are the mountain ranges and stuff. So it's really, really cool. And the work they do is important for these kids, obviously, so they can have a equitable access to the materials. But it's pretty neat.
I will report, I think it was it last month that we got a little braille thing? Anyways,
It was in
I
March.
got it, was it March?
Yeah, I brought it.
I got the word "the" with a capital T and gave up. And it was so hard. I don't know how.
It is hard.
Like I looked at this, I'm like, oh my
I know,
goodness.
it doesn't even.
And USIMAC printed those for all of you for our March.
So
That's what it seemed like.
another fascinating thing is when you have your proofreaders of the content, their fingers will get, what would you say, raw from reading through stuff, which you would never think of, but it just kind of
Occupational hazard.
these little dynamics that you never think about. But, Joe, did you have a question?
How long would one of these books last? I'm guessing it wears down.
Well, if you will see, the ones that are the overlays are made of stronger material. I really can't answer that question, but those are also nice. I think it was very convenient that you had these here today. But those are really nice because parents and teachers who don't know Braille can read to their students and the students can follow along. That's the really nice thing about having those overlays as well. But a book like this, I can't answer that question, but I would echo Board Member Earl's recommendation to go do a tour. It really is fascinating to see how things work.
The dots do wear down though, and you have to reprint them. But once they're coded though, you can reprint it without doing all the original work again.
And they have to know like, there's very specific requirements, national requirements, like where page numbers go or don't go, where certain things go, that you would never think of. So it's pretty incredible to look at. Did you have a question?
I did, and I want to follow board member Wood. I guess we were on licensing earlier, and she said we always jump into the questions before we say thank you. So, thank you. And now come the questions. No, but this really has nothing to do with the presentation, but one thing I noticed, I think it was my first year on the board, you took your deaf and blind students out like on crew, like a rowing expedition. And I remember seeing that online and thinking, how do they do that? And then today, I think in your presentation, you had some of your students like at axe throwing and archery, like and I look at that, and I guess my question is this: sometimes our schools are so risk adverse, and we take some of the adventure out of recess and out of these activities, and we make them, rightfully so, because we're concerned, but how do you as an institution find that balance? Like, I could see with some of our schools just saying, we're not going to do this, it's too risky. How do you find that balance?
Can I just answer this? We took our blind kids out shooting guns. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? No, it was extremely safe. But if you read the recent research that Greg Lukanoff and Jonathan Haidt have done in The Anxious Generation, they talk about the concept of all kids actually not having enough risk-taking in their lives. One of the things and the associates and our directors could speak better than I can to it, but part of the expanded core, part of the principles we have is helping parents understand that these students, as much or more than anyone else, need to be allowed to experience things and not be so bubble wrapped and protected all the time. And it's a really challenging thing. Do you have additional thoughts to that?
I do, actually. This is one of the School for the Blind's big pushes in the next school year, is to offer opportunities to these physical opportunities for students who are blind, visually impaired throughout the state, including things like our 70-48 boat race, and getting we're implementing a rowing team, so students can start to get experiences with that. And if I may, I want to share a quick story with you. So I was able to attend our study abroad when we went to London a couple of years ago, and we had a student on that trip who was never at USDB, never really receiving USDB services. He was in one of our larger school districts, but he applied to go on this trip, and he was able to go. And at that point, he had a degenerative vision loss, and at that point, he was just experiencing some night blindness. So he was doing pretty well during the day and having a hard time accepting the fact that he was going to lose his vision, and didn't really want to use his white cane until he absolutely had to. And we were kind of watching him through that journey. Well, his vision has progressively gone downhill pretty fast, but he was able to participate in the 70-48 boat race. And just last week, he reached out to us, and he's doing this initiative where he's biking from this, I can't remember where he's going, from the northern part of the state to the western part. He's trying to just raise awareness, and he's putting it out there to get experiences with other people and to bring them into his world. And so he's on a tandem bike where he's in the recumbent position, so he's in front so he can see everything, and somebody behind them is being the pilot biker on this. Anyhow, so he invited us, and he actually rode through Springville and stopped, and stopped at our campus, and we had a really good talk with him, and we're just asking him, like, what got you into this? And he told us, he said, I've always been really a big thrill seeker, and when I got my diagnosis of the vision loss, I just was devastated, and I thought, this is going to take away that sense of adventure for me. And he said, I'm going to get a little emotional. He said, going on that 70-48 boat trip and experiencing that and being part of that, that was the game changer for me in my life. That changed my attitude and made me realize I can do it. I can do anything I want, and I just need to have the right resources in place. And Susan and I were both there, and just that was a very powerful experience. And so this, and it really is very important that we're trying to increase the access to those opportunities for our students.
And I just want to say, it's not just the events, but like your curriculum, you talked about before, like where each student has to navigate their way home.
Right.
And I don't know where that was in your curriculum, but so it doesn't have to be like a standalone, right, event, but you just weave that into your curriculum. And I think we could learn a lot from increasing the risk taking without necessarily the risky event, and then we need to do a better job with that. So thank you for finding that balance in your curriculum.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because why you would say we pushed for that is we have over the years seen the detrimental effects of not taking risks. That's where students end up in their parents' basements, sitting and not producing and not engaging. So I would say that the risk is greater to not expose them to those things, because otherwise they're frightened of the world and they sit in their basements and they rely on other people instead of realizing they have every capability to do everything else everybody else is doing. The world is shaped for people who can hear and see, but that does not mean that they cannot fully engage even though they have a hearing or vision loss. We can make this work very well. So I think that tells them the reality of what it is. So I think it's a matter of knowing the risk on the other end. That's kind of unknown risk to most people.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair.
Board Member Davis, you have a comment? Yeah, just speak it out.
I was just going to say, when you look at those numbers of growth in those PIP numbers, 2 of those are my grandbabies. Still likely to be in multi-disability category, but we understand right now that they're probably almost totally blind. And we just love the person, I should say my daughter loves the person who's coming. She says that she's really grateful for the PIP program and for the people who are coming to support. So it's been really interesting, because when you put the data on the board, I always try to imagine individual people, but now experiencing it on a first-hand level, it feels like every number there is like an actual person, and it's really sweet experience. So thank you. I was just going to ask, on the new FTE that we need, is that for the growth, or is that for what we already have that we were subsidizing through like ESSER funds or something before? Because I've heard both, and I just want to make sure I'm clear in my mind.
Cindy, if you go to the document, and tell me if I'm answering this wrong, the light shaded parts are people we're funding this year that without additional funding, they won't be funded next year. Does that make sense? Is this what you're asking?
And the rest is growth?
And then the darker shade, like there's a yellow light shade and a yellow dark shade, those are ones we're asking for going into next year for adequate funding.
There's some of each.
Yes.
I will look at that.
And if you have additional questions, you can either check with Superintendent Coleman, or I can maybe help.
Thank you.
And there's only one that was ESSER funded, and that was the counselor.
Oh, okay.
The rest are just USDB funds from our carry forward, and hopefully the legislature will fund for ongoing.
Sorry, carry forward is the bulk of what I was thinking, so that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, those are the light shaded ones.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
Thank you for your comments about the multi-disabled students, because sometimes people look at the data and like you see the red, and those are our students that have other disabilities. And although they're not going to score super high on any test, they are of great worth and of great value to us, and they have great things to give to the world. And so we love that you have recognized that in those 2 children. But we have the blessing of seeing those kids progress, and we're excited when a child is able to grab a spoon on their own, or a child is able to attend to something they couldn't see before, or now they've said a word they've never said before. And those things can't be measured on some of these graphs, but they are phenomenal and make all the difference for a child.
Thank you.
Okay. Superintendent Coleman.
Thank you. That is our annual report. The next item is our financial report for the month from Carl Empey.
Okay, great. Good afternoon. The financial reports for the first 2 months, they ended August 31st. The most important words I can say is we remain financially solvent and in good shape on the finances and cash basis. In terms of our inflows of revenues, we totaled $8.1 million for the first 2 months. That is really a culmination of the state transferring almost $3.8 million to us every month to help cover our salaries and personnel costs and our operational expenses. And in addition, then the transfers that we get from the grants and from your office. We spent $4.8 million of the 8.1, leaving us a balance of $3.3 million. You may recall when we did the financial report for July, we only had a partial payroll because we didn't have the teachers coming back to school yet. So the $3.3 million surplus is going to be utilized throughout the year on salary expense. The number of students that we have on campus is 351 as of the end of August. The students receiving services, 2,057, and the student services provided, 3,125. So we'll see, Chair Moss was asking about the growth. We're going to see substantial growth coming, and we're seeing that already year to date. I think we've got 60 kids so far?
Yep.
Over 60 kids, students in our numbers that we've already received. And we anticipated about 85, so the 85 may be short, and we may exceed that.
So can you tell us where are those falling in between your PIP programs and your preschool? No. Preschool programs, you've had a number increase there, and then also within just your general area? Okay, thank you. It's the October counts? Okay.
What's your total
The
October 1st?
Right now, we're sitting, if I were to pull up the data, at 353.
Which is less than 369.
Right. Because some of the kids have moved into the district from last year.
Okay.
The three funds that we always report to is the land grant enrichment fund, in which a lot of these extracurricular activities are funded in some of our programs, and the deaf mentors will modify that and amend it since we took those out of the legislative request. The balance in that right now is $1,036,190. The donated fund account, I'm just going to round up, is roughly $282,000, and our foundation balance is roughly $1,183,000. The next 2 pages is the budget status report that shows each of the revenues and the composition of the revenues and the aggregate total. They equals the report numbers that I just reported on. And then we have the operational expenses. As you'll see, the personnel service is by far our largest expense for the year. Then the next report is the enrichment fund report. Of the $1.4 million that you approved, excuse me, we've only spent $68,000, leaving us a balance of $1.4 million. So, Madam Chair, that is the financial report.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we're not on it again. We agreed and now it's not, yeah. So, yeah, very good. Any other items?
Just the superintendent.
Okay.
Okay, for my superintendent report today, I just have a couple of items. One is good news. Actually, they're all good news. Let's just say that. I didn't mean to cause any anxiety here. The first piece of good news is that the Division of Facilities and Construction Management has received the written reports from the 2 groups that were studying USDB over the last 5,000 months. And,
No, you're good.
and we just this week got a draft copy. We have a meeting scheduled with members of board leadership, DFCM, whoever. We're not in charge of this. We were just invited on Tuesday with one group and Thursday next week with the other group. So as we just on an airplane this weekend, I just started reading through the nearly 500 pages of report materials, and there were a few findings we didn't agree with too much, but they were very minor. Things like, well, you should have involved stakeholders when you built the OEC. And I'm like, we did like 25 groups, but when they interviewed people on our campuses, they said, I don't know, I wasn't here, so they didn't get feedback from me. It's little things like that, right? But the major overall findings, just for a sneak preview, are, if anything, we've underestimated the needs for the future. And so it was very vindicating what I've read so far, and it's good. So there will be more to follow, and we will be sharing that with the board as soon as we possibly can. And so anyway, we got that in, and the ball hopefully will be rolling. But it will require a new statewide strategic long-term plan for these, and so that's great. We will have lots of help with it, I think, now that these two groups independently have written down what their findings and recommendations are, and they did really good research. I was impressed with how much data they gathered from outside the state as well, and that of course will really help. Okay, the second thing I wanted to mention was, it's not on this. I know I had something else. Oh. No, maybe not. That's my superintendent report today. Unless Associate Superintendent Tanner or Director Farah have anything additional. Do you have anything for the board?
I think we've sent out, both Susan Patton and myself have sent out, the light went on. Both of us have sent out information related to activities that are coming this month. And so you are welcome to, if you have any questions or would like to join, you guys have busy schedules, but just so you can see what we're doing and have an awareness level, we share those out. And you're welcome to attend any of those, and we would love to have you involved.
Our report.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it then.
I have
right?
one more.
Oh, sorry, one more question here.
I'm going to White Cane Day tomorrow.
Oh, yay.
But I have a question for Chair Earl, Vice Chair Earl. I'm looking at the chart that you suggested, just to get clear, everything in light is previously funded and everything in dark is growth, because the words are contradictory a little bit. So I just want to make sure it's not labeled, so I'm understanding it right in my head.
The light colors are funded with carry
Board funding.
Everything in light was funded with carry forward funding. Everything else is new growth.
Which needs to, and the ones in light would need to be funded next year if we continue. And then the other items are the growth items.
Got it.
So if you look at those, the light colored ones all say FY25, which is right
Yeah,
now.
on the side.
The darker colors are FY26, what will be needed next school year. And so the ones currently we have funded with one-time money that runs out at the end of this year. That's.
And one other item, there's five positions that, for district that fell below the 3%. So now we would have to provide those at USDB. And so those,
Conversation.
yeah, you can see on the side, it will tell you. But those are 5 that are going to be mandated. So we've got to figure funding out for those, so yeah. Okay.
And the one where we lost ESSER funds.
And then the one we did lose ESSER funds. So.
Can I share one thing from Advisory Council that is a positive? So we have had some desire from outside LEAs to look at how the enrichment funds are being used. And so for the first time, the Advisory Council was able to present a grant to a student to be able to be involved in an experience in their own LEA, but use money for the enrichment funds. I believe it was a blind student wanting to go to a band. So those opportunities are being opened up, and I just think it's great the way the Advisory Council is looking at the needs across the state to use those enrichment funds in a way to benefit all of our students that fit into these that can be helped through these funds, so.
And that's been a frequent question that we get asked. Are we still up here? Oh, no. I don't know what's going on. All of a sudden it's on and then it's not.
It's both on.
It's both. Okay, we're good then. I just want to make sure we're doing what we need to. Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming. And we will go to unfinished business.
Can you give me like a minute just to check with Jerry?
We're going to actually take just a quick 5-minute break if you need to go. Oh, and let's get all your books back.
So there's a priority issue, trying to fix it when it could
When you
That's what I thought. I just thought I would double check.
I didn't realize it was That's interesting.
trying to fix the priority, and I just don't.
Do they have to have,
As long as they're
do they
chairman.
have to have like liability insurance, like somebody that is a DJ?
Everybody should chairman, everybody should turn out.
They do have to have insurance?
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's weird. It's just like working and then it was just like, I'm good.
This
So
happened.
if we have,
No, I'm Sid Young. My mom, I grew up in
Sid Young Dean insurance.
I live over in the December.
Sid Young used to work here and now she's turning off. Does she have to have insurance?
You're doing this the 100 degree.
I started like yeah. Yeah. Me, the ghost of Kelsey. Yes.
So one of our teachers who is able to do a science of reading and letters training is going to do a couple of sessions for us as professionals.
Somebody's watching.
Feels like Christmas, that lady. All right. Okay. I do too.
She just finished her second master's.
Yeah, I can see why that.
Keep up with that. The brother was a lot of degrees.
Okay, so just tell them he's full of soup. I mean, I'm not gonna tell that. I'm just gonna.
Minute a day is pretty,
Oh,
I think.
You are so sweet. Our insurance rates are gonna go up because we're about to already
I just heard 5 million goals and I was like, please God, no. So,
with their Nope, they were just there to eat funnel cakes because he's just totally worried about what this he thinks that we have to cover this. No, he's just all worried about the whole area of insurance and costs and a soccer ball went through a dual immersion teacher's windshield. He just wants everybody to have lots of insurance.
Seems like there's always like
Yeah, we went through a dual immersion. Yes, and he's worried about it going up, so. And we already had one broken on it. Like things are
we're gonna start in about 2 minutes, just.
Around the fire, microphones don't turn back on. Around the fire, microphones don't turn back on. Yeah, until Jerry says so.
Who's driving this afternoon?
Test 1 2.
So about signing permissions, like that. Oh, that's more for kids.
That sounds harsh.
All right.
Okay, I like that better.
Next time. I know, I'll have to. I know, awesome. That's okay, we'll stay on. Okay.
This wasn't an answer, you know, like elsewhere.
Leave the overhead. And then,
It is the.
Okay, thank you, that helps a lot.
So that's why I'm, like,
And so now that I said,
Oh, look, the little kids.
And in a way they do, but it's also lightweight, so.
Okay, so we're ready to start.
Stop shouting.
And I'm just going to give you a little, this is how this works. This is really high tech. It's on. Okay? So if anyone has any questions, just let me know. You're going to have to do one of these, though, because we won't be able to put you in order, is the only thing. Sorry, I scared a few of you. I didn't realize it was that loud. Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started with our afternoon, and we have items that we've moved forward. And I believe, let me see where we left off. It looks like we're at a motion that was tabled. Do we have to make a motion to pull it off the table, right?
I think that'd be safer.
Yeah, yep. Okay, so is there anyone that's interested in pulling this motion off the table? And I'll remind you what the motion was. So let me read just through the motion, because I'm having to remind myself too. This motion was made by Member Norton that the board consider taking the following actions related to statewide online education program, SEOP, for home and private school participation. Request staff to bring back the following options for committee discussion. Work with legislators to develop clarification on the relationship between the board and the future contractor to administer this program, and research legislative direction on services delivered in a hybrid environment requiring physical attendance versus the statutory intent for a completely online learning experience open to all students as described in code, and/or moving this hybrid approach out of SEOP program to its own line item for clarity and specific guidance on the implementation. Then we have, someone
Wow,
help me.
I'm all about bringing that back for sure.
Can someone help me? What is the second part? Where's Sybil? Does
Where do we find this? Is it in our agenda? Well, or is it just on the board?
It's probably here. I'm thinking so. And then the motion to amend, so that was the motion, then the motion to amend was made by Member Davis and seconded by Member Bogus, that the board amend the following options. 3, seeking legislative change during interim on services delivered in the hybrid environment requiring physical. Okay, so I'm thinking that would, the intent was to substitute that one piece for this piece. Someone tell me if I'm wrong. You guys all attended yesterday. Okay, and there, so it would be adding and seeking a legislative change during the interim. And then also at the bottom it would be, and rename the private school portion and keep the homeschool portion with USBE. I think there were complications with that, but that's a side note. And then on 4, add 4th bullet stating, request staff continue working on the existing statutory required SOEP, RFP, unless or until the requirement is amended by the legislature. That's what we would be picking up off the table. Oh, it's moved to pull it off the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
We're taking it back off the table. We laid it on the table.
Yeah, we're bringing it back.
You have to remove it from the table.
We didn't vote.
There was a second, right? Okay, so the second is to remove, I'm not going to read that motion. Yeah, what?
I just have a point of information.
Yeah.
My point of information is we received an email, I believe addressed to all board members, from Kelsey at about 2 o'clock. And it basically, it's just an FAQ, but the very last sentence says, please note that SOEP staff is preparing a draft new rule for board consideration regarding contractor management of home and private online students. The nature of the draft rule is a near duplication of the SOEP rule, R277-726. My question is, are we waiting for that draft, or what we're seeing here is the draft?
Be a topic of discussion, right?
We might want to call on
Can we get a clarification on that?
Do you have to vote to pull it off the table?
I can tell you how it relates to my.
Yeah, we would, but I guess you're trying to decide whether to pull it off the table?
Right.
So that would be relevant to whether we pull it off the table or not.
We just raise our hands, or what do we do?
No, because I got to call it out. But we're asking clarification so that board member Carey knows whether to pull it off the table or not.
Motion maker, can I say that relates to my motion?
We have to,
Oh, because we didn't vote.
we haven't voted on that, but he isn't sure if he wants to vote to take it off the table yet. So do you want to come give us some detail? Did you understand the question, or would you like it relayed again? That's it.
Good afternoon. My name is Quinn Kellis, Lead Administrator for the State Online Education Program. To answer the question, there is an RFP moving down one track. There's other business going down a parallel track. The RFP has to continue until it is taken off that track. Part of that RFP is that we are going to be shifting home and private to a contractor. In order for that to happen, there has to be board rule to say what that contractor does. So to the question, what is that last paragraph talking about? It is in support of the RFP so that the home and private are managed outside of SOAP.
And maybe, could I ask a clarifying question that maybe is related to this? Meaning that, is it necessary for us to pull this motion and address that in the motion? Or is that just part of what will naturally happen because of what's already in place?
That's what's naturally going to happen regardless.
Of what happens here?
What happens on this track.
Ah,
So this track is what's being discussed today. This track is
already in motion.
going to happen
Okay.
unless legislatively deferred.
Okay, does that
It does.
help you? Are there any other, do you have a question? Okay, I'm just guessing with, if I see red. So, okay, what the motion before the board is that, oh, yes. Sorry, I'm reading what we have on here, that we tabled the motion. If we,
My understanding was tabled to
you tabled it. I believe that's the case, but we can get verification. So, okay, we're gonna,
Wait, I have
oh,
a point of
yeah,
information.
sure.
How many votes are needed to pull an item off the table? Is that still simple majority, or is it something? It's a majority, thank you.
Okay, good question. Let's go ahead and vote. Let me grab my, oh, yeah, whether you want it pulled from the table or not, sure. Board Member Davis, go ahead and speak to your polling or not.
Do I get to choose on my own? Oh, I picked the same one again.
But as soon as it's red, it's on, so.
Okay, I'd like to pull it off the table so that we can discuss it. Particularly, I just want to make sure that there's a clarification on information. I know some people got some text saying there was misinformation shared, and the sender of the text called me this morning, and when I asked what the misinformation was, it was information from Ed Interim. And I was like, I was not in Ed Interim, and that topic was not ever discussed in our committee or in our board. Anyway, I'd like to answer any questions that are out there, and it's going to be what it is. I haven't talked to,
Okay.
been calling people or whatever, but I just think it's worth the conversation so that people understand the
The dynamics,
situation, and then however people need to go, they need to go.
Okay, I don't see any other lights on or hands raised, so we're going to go ahead and start at the top. Board Member Bogus, do we have anyone online right now? Oh, she is online. Board Member Bogus, this is to pull from the table.
Yes.
Board Member Booth?
Yes.
Board Member Klein? Board Member Davis?
Yes.
Board Member Vice Chair Earl's a yes. Board Member Green? Board Member Hart?
Yes.
Board Member Hymas?
Yes.
Board Member Carey?
Yes.
Board Member Lear?
Yes.
Board Member Norton?
Yes.
Board Member Rill? Board Member Straight?
Yes.
Board Member Wood?
Yes.
And Chair Moss?
Yes.
Okay, that passes. That was passed unanimously, but we are missing 2, so 13 votes in favor. All right, we have it pulled from the table. Board Member Davis, did you want to articulate anything?
Well, I'll be happy to answer any questions that are out there. I think I want to make it really clear that I think some people are voting one way for different, but maybe political ideological reasons. I want to make it very clear that this motion is about clarity. It's not about an opinion of whether they should be in a separate group, or they should be pulled, or this or that. That's already done. That's already done legislatively. So they are being moved out from under USBE legislatively. And the question remains then, what is the clarity of the opportunity? Because what it looks like for private school students right now looks very different for homeschool students. And someone talking to me this morning said, well, a private school student can do everything a homeschool student can. Yes, let's make this clear. This is true. A homeschool student cannot do everything a private school student can do, because a homeschool student cannot walk into the room and get an in-person class taught through this program. So it's really grown. It's grown so much that it needs to be two separate programs. And if we're in the space of increasing choice, if you include these together and it moves into that, then you're actually decreasing opportunity for homeschool, because the same person this morning said, well, the homeschoolers can just access SOEP through UFA. Let's be really clear. Yes, they absolutely can. When they do, the state has created a new group called UFA. They are no longer a homeschooling student. They are no longer coded as a homeschooling student. They retain homeschooling status when they're enrolled through SOEP, similar to what we've been doing here at our office. If they go through UFA, then they lose the opportunity for speech, special education services, things like that, because once they become a scholarship student, there are pros to that too. They get more variety. They could do a course through an SOEP provider, and for PE, they could do dancing class, or however it is they work out those pieces. But that's a different thing from the homeschooling section of SOEP. So to add clarity for everybody involved, and the flexibility, I think, that the private school group is seeking and are going to write new code anyway now, I'm understanding and hearing, it would behoove everybody to make it very clear what's allowable and not allowable, because it's like right now we're trying to fit this growth that's exploded, the private school section, we're trying to fit sort of a square peg into a round hole. So why not create a name and a code that makes a round hole for the round hole and preserves the opportunity, and it doesn't in any way dilute the opportunity for homeschooling students or public school students to maintain this sort of full course experience over here on this side. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive and that there's one that's bad or right or wrong. I just think it's currently totally unclear because it's gotten so big. It's time for there to be one channel here. Maybe it's called private digital partnerships or something of the like. But the two should be named different things for clarity. And if you don't vote for it, you don't vote for it. But I just want to make it clear to the public, this is about clarity. It's not about politics.
Okay, and I think Board Member Bagas, there's an indication that you have a question, or?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me there?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Chair, I would just like to speak in favor of Board Member Davis's motion. This originated in the Finance Committee, and through that process, Board Member Davis and I were able to have many conversations. And I too got some phone calls and a text message in particular. And some of the things articulated in that were not actually truthful or factual because the evidence speaks to the contrary. And so I agree with her assessment that this is about clarity. It's not about politics, because we do have some loopholes that are being exploited, and we need to close those loopholes. And so I would just speak in favor of the motion. I don't believe that in any way, shape, or form this is going to get us to the end zone, if you will, but I think it's going to put us inside of the 10-yard line so that we can get this figured out and move forward in a way that's fruitful and positive for all students in Utah and expand opportunities. I think this motion expands opportunities for kids. I don't think it narrows it, and I would just ask my fellow board members to vote in favor of it. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Board Member Laird, do you have a question?
I do. I had a question for Board Member Davis.
Go ahead and ask her.
If you want to answer it. You said something that caught me off guard. You said that the homeschoolers currently could take advantage through UFA, but they'd have to fit within the cap of UFA, would they not?
Yes.
They're
and
not separate enough that they're a different UFA group, are they?
They are a different UFA group.
So there is a different opportunity for home?
No, they're not.
Well,
They would still have to fit within the cap of UFA. They would have to be one that was accepted into UFA.
Right.
oh, yeah, sorry, I misunderstood the question.
Yeah.
But they are coded differently for SOEP purposes.
Maybe.
The
I just wanted to-
UFA students are coded differently than the homeschool students, and they're provided differently. So they wouldn't receive special ed services through the SOEP provider if they are coded as a UFA
Oh, I totally get that part
student.
of it.
But they may take some extra part of that money if they only want one course and maybe get speech somewhere else or something like that. So I'm not saying they wouldn't get anything at all, but it wouldn't be provided with it.
And I think I'm asking something a little bit different, and that is that they are not automatically included within UFA. They have to apply and
Correct.
be under the number
Correct.
of people who are getting the vouchers, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And-
That's just, I wanted to clarify that.
And regardless if this passes or not today, I want to make sure that, I appreciated the phone call I had this morning because it was really helpful in creating more clarity, I think, for the person who sent the text and myself. And I don't think, the language is that dissimilar in what we're working toward, but I just think we need more clarity. And I think if, however it goes today, the one thing I do think we need to ask for sure is that as this new code progresses, that there's clarity about what, if any, role the USBE has. Because right now we have no direction in the one line of code. So what we're doing, as mentioned here, is creating a new rule. It just looks like the one we have now in absence of any other thing that we have. So,
I just appreciate the research for all of us. Thank you.
yeah, thanks.
Can I ask one question? Oh, go ahead.
Okay, this is probably a question for staff. It has to do with online and also assessment. So public ed students who take an online course or courses are held accountable through our USBE statewide assessment. Correct? Okay.
Go ahead.
So that was question one. And
Okay.
then private school students who take online courses do not participate in the statewide online assessments through USBE. Are they held accountable? But up until now, homeschool students did not have to do those assessments. If they take these online courses, would they be taking those accountability assessments?
Do you have
Madam
a?
Chair, may I respond?
Yeah, go ahead if you've got an answer for that.
Members of the board, Member Norton, the SOEP program providers, so there are 7, but 6 public providers, are obligated to offer the state assessment to all the students. There are very few full-time online students. Most of the students, the great majority of students, have 1 or 2 classes. And the rest of their classes for public students and private, they take at their neighborhood school. The private school students take that at their private schools. It's a little bit different there, but so they can take that state assessment at their neighborhood school, but the providers are still obligated to make arrangements for state testing for all the students who are enrolled, whether they waive it, take it at their regular school, or take the test. There are those options. So for homeschool and private school and public, they will be offered the opportunity. They can say no to that. They can opt out.
Do they, if they're a
Okay, wait, you're going to have to, yep.
Can I follow up just quickly?
Yes, that's
If
fine.
they're a homeschool student, where are they taking this test if they don't opt out?
Madam
Yes,
Chair, may I
please go ahead.
So the providers where the students are taking the courses from would be required to make a space available. There's a question about that because it's statewide, and providers have offices or centers. It could be in St. George, it could be in Davis. In the past, there's been challenges, barriers to that because they have to either require the student to travel across the state to do it at their location or open up testing centers around the state for them to take those assessments. But ultimately, it's their responsibility.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Board Member Davis, I think our mics might be working.
Can they, contract with the neighborhood school of the student to take it there or something? Or do they have to go to a special location?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair. That's up to each provider, how they manage that element. It's not mandated by the state how it's going to happen. In the past, as I've said, they have made arrangements either in a hotel conference room or at a library or at a local school. There are different options that they could use to meet that obligation.
Okay, are there any other questions? All right, if not, oh, yes, go ahead.
I'm going to just speak. I'm going to abstain from the vote, and I just wanted to speak to that. And that is, one, I want to thank Board Member Davis on this information that she provided. I have heard from Board Member Davis, Board Member Boggess was kind enough to reach out, as well as other individuals. And usually there's a difference over the facts. Like, people see things differently in terms of what they want to accomplish. Almost everyone I spoke to, they're in agreement that we need to do something. And interestingly, there seems to be a consensus as to how that should look. But what really surprised me was the difference over the facts that draw these parties to the conclusions they've made. And I just don't feel that I really have a strong grasp on the facts of this matter. So even though I'm inclined to support the end conclusion, generally, I just don't feel I'm in a position of, I have a master of these facts. And so because of that, I'm just going to abstain from the vote. Thank you.
Okay, and Board Member Hart, go ahead.
So for me, my thought process is slightly different. I just don't know why we'd even address this when when we know legislation is, we have a pretty good suspicion there will be more legislation. It just feels like it's unnecessarily confusing the matter. Let's just work with our legislators and get these items worked out in legislation. We change it now, and then we change it back, or we change, and then legislature changes. I feel like there's no clarity in this space. So just leave it alone and let's get it right. And we already know that it's going somewhere, somehow, fairly soon. It just feels extraneous. I don't know. That's my rationale.
Okay, so the motion before the board after. Okay.
Member Davis is
Member
before me.
Davis, go ahead. Now,
Chair.
I'm not trying to do the you've talked
Chair,
twice rule, but we've got to.
if we let the legislature just do everything, we don't need a board. I mean, this is only to add an opinion in. It's
Okay.
not to demand or mandate. It's to say, hey, when you're doing this new code, consider a new name and to add clarity to what's happening in this space, and consider keeping homeschool students with us, the very tiny amount of 150 kids, because their program looks very different than this other group. And that's our opinion, and they can do whatever they want, and we're going to fall in line to whatever they want to do. But it's our opportunity to add an opinion.
Board Member Wood?
And that's where I was going to go, as we talked about, we know legislation is coming. Why would we not, as a board, offer our, where we're coming from and looking, and then I too have had texts coming in that said these splits needs to happen because we have a homeschooling group, we have a private group, they're different and they need to be thought of as such. And so.
Board Member Carey?
Yeah, if it was just us giving feedback to the legislature, and I think we can do that collectively or individually, I'm sure that we all do. But as I'm reading this, to me, this goes beyond that, right? Because we're saying, yes, consider a private part and a public part, and then we say, and keep the homeschool portion with USBE. And this is the part that I don't feel like I really understand, the pluses and the minuses, and it's my understanding that historically, when it dealt with homeschooling issues, they didn't want to deal with USBE, and typically USBE didn't want to deal with them. So when I see something like that, I think this is a very big step. And I'm not saying it's the wrong step, I just don't feel comfortable in that. I don't understand the full import of that yet, so that's why I'll be abstaining.
Okay, Board Member Booth, do you have a comment?
I do.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I've observed one of my colleagues, specifically Board Member Davis, over a number of years, and I know the depth with which she wraps her mind around things and the number of people that she talks to when she comes to the board with something like this. I trust that opinion, and I will be supporting this motion because I just believe that she is wanting our board to have a position and to communicate that position for the good of students across the state of Utah. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I don't have names, so I'm doing seats here. So I'm assuming you're next, and then we'll go to Chair Moss. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And I am going to be voting against this motion. I can see that there are a lot of complications involved here, but as different as public school and private school can be, homeschool is its own entity as well. And I think, if they're going to make a change, they ought to possibly look at that change as well. I don't know, but I don't know that we just need to naturally say, yeah, homeschool is like public school, so let's be in charge of charge of homeschool and their oversight as well. I don't think that's exactly what anybody was asking for, and I don't necessarily think that's what is best in this situation.
Chair Moss?
This is, I think, another variation on the same thing. I greatly appreciate Member Davis digging into this. We've had discussions. I've looked at the research. I just have to say as well, having talked to a bunch of people, I'm still not entirely clear about the ramifications. There are disputes over how things work. I think it's a great discussion. I think our board should be engaged, and I appreciate, on that note, Member Davis stepping into that discussion with the proposal. I think I might abstain for the same reasons. I don't want to say that this isn't the right answer. I'm just not sure as I sit here that it is the right answer, but I definitely think we want to be continuing the discussion and whatever the vote here, continue to weigh in for the legislature. So that's probably a bit muddled, but I think that I might not be the only one. We're dealing with a tricky, complicated, with moving pieces based on where fits all comes into this. That's another thing that complicates an already tricky situation. So again, just in the interest of explaining myself, I may abstain, but I don't think I want to be done with the discussion. I don't think our board wants to sit on the sidelines.
Point of information.
Yes.
If this doesn't pass, then do we consider the main motion
Well,
that
there would
came
be
out of
no,
committee?
the amendments would not pass. 'Cause
Right,
that's
but then
what's-
the main motion
And then the main
would
motion would be before the
considered.
body.
Okay, awesome. And I get that, Chair. We're all trying to wrap our
okay.
heads around it.
Okay, I just want to make, if I'm wrong, someone correct me real quick here. That's what I understand. Are you speaking?
I just have a question, point of information.
Yeah, go
And that
ahead.
is for the second one, at a bullet number 3. If that provision wasn't there, staff is still going to continue to work as statutorily required, correct?
Yeah, so this is part,
if
part of the amendment, so.
If this does not pass, staff is still going to continue doing what they're legislatively charged to do.
Is that correct, saying yes? Yeah.
I just want to make sure it was redundant. Okay, thank you.
Good question. Yes? Board Member Lear?
However, staff will continue to work on this, but they won't have the direction from the board that would be provided in this, if this vote were to pass.
Well,
They
they would continue with the legal obligations in the direction they're headed, but even if we,
To discuss with staff, or I mean, to discuss with legislators, but the staff would not have direction from the board that we think it would be cleaner to have a homeschool group and a private school.
yes, but I think the question was just related to the amendment on number 3.
Right.
Was that, am
But
I, sorry,
I
maybe
thought
I'm
it
missing
also
something.
went back to the underlying motion that is more vague, and continuing to
Okay.
work is then leaves the rest of the board outside of the leadership, not knowing what direction the leadership and the staff are going.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think there's already a legislative track, as Quinn was explaining, right? One track, the legislature already directed, that's going forward. That's not up to leadership or staff. We're just following directions. Alternate track proposed by Member Davis that we may or may not take, which itself would only affect the other track if the legislature said, okay, we're going to go that direction instead, right? So I think the decision is, do we pursue this other alternate track or just let that one go where we follow the legislature's direction?
Or we're just stuck with.
Yeah,
Right, and
understood.
it's-
But
and
what I
it's
mean is,
stuck-
I
we're
just want to
stuck
make
with
clear
the
that
one-
we're following
the track.
legislative direction, not board leadership direction. If we don't go this other clarifying route that Member Davis takes, then we just follow the
Okay, all
legislative
right.
direction
I
that's
think we're
already in place.
beating this to death.
Okay, we're
Thank
going to
you.
vote on the amendment. After we, Board Member Green.
Well, I'm going to miss Angie Stallings, and I think she has something she might want to say. So I'm going to give her a chance. So
Okay.
Can I pass the mic through
Weigh
the
in.
board?
Well, thank you. And you must have seen me pressing my light and then I'm off. No, yes, no. It's always that I'm torn on, do I talk less and smile more, or do I actually insert myself? So, okay. Just behind the scenes here, yes, no risk, right? Behind the scenes, we were just wanting to maybe clarify a little bit what our relationship is with the homeschool students who participate. Because it may appear when you hear leaving the homeschool portion of the program with USBE, it makes it sound like there's a stronger relationship or any kind of accountability, which there's not. It's more of a service, like they come, they sign up, and we provide the funding to the providers. We don't oversee them. We don't necessarily have a really direct relationship with them, if that makes sense. So mostly wanted to clarify. I think the difference, and I don't want to speak for Board Member Davis or even try to summarize what you were saying, but what we've seen is the way that private school students have accessed the program is very different than how the homeschool students have accessed the program. Generally, homeschool students who participate in the program are accessing the program very similarly to the public school students. They're 100% online courses. Even the public school students who engage in SOEP are very independent. They get to select the courses they want independently. They're primarily doing it from their home setting. So in a lot of ways, the public school students who engage in SOEP and the homeschool students that engage in SOEP are almost identical, except for how the funding is accounted for. And so in a lot of ways, that's why my guess is certain people think that keeping those two together makes sense versus having the private school students who are participating. As we know, some of those are in a hybrid setting. They're not 100% virtual. They're actually receiving services while they are at their school, not from home. And so we wanted to share with you that's not that USBE is getting into the homeschool setting. It's still very independent, very family driven, and very similar to how the public school students access the program. Is there anything I missed, Scott? He volunteered me. I'm the little sister today. He's big brother. And that's why you saw me pushing my button. And it was because they said, no risk, Angie, if you say something I don't like.
Okay. A good point. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take a vote on the amendments. And I will read those for us. So it's seek a legislative change during interim on services delivered in the hybrid environment requiring physical attendance versus the statutory intent for completely online learning experience open to all students as described in code, and or moving this hybrid approach out of the SOEP program to its own line item for clarity and specific guidance on the implementation, and rename the private school portion and keep the homeschool portion with USBE. And 4 was add fourth bullet stating request staff continued work with existing statutory required SOEP RFP unless or until a requirement is amended by the legislature. That's it. And Christina, do you still have a hand up? Sorry.
No, well, yes and no. I think Member Lear said what I wanted. Well, not everything.
Okay.
But she said a few of the things I wanted to say. I'm happy to
All right.
withdraw my intent to speak.
I'm so sorry. I did have you written down. I just was so excited to get to the amendment. So we already did it. We did it. We're on the amendment. So we're going to go ahead and vote. This is the amendment to the motion. All right. Board Member Bogus?
Yes.
Board Member Booth?
Yes.
Board Member Klein? Board Member Davis?
Yes.
Board Member Earl is a no. Board Member Green? Board Member Hart?
Big mic.
You can use your big mic now.
No.
Board Member Hymas?
Yes.
Board Member Carey?
No.
Board Member Lair?
Yes.
Board Member Norton? No. Board Member Rill? Board Member Straight?
Sarah.
Real is a yes.
Oh,
Did you
okay.
catch that?
Nope, I didn't, but I did now. So Board Member Wood?
Yes.
And Chair Moss?
Abstain.
Okay. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 yeses on the amendments. Okay. So the amendments passed. We're back to the original motion. What does that look like? So the original motion is request staff to bring back the following options. Okay, let's see. Was made by member taking action. All right. Options for committee discussion. That's all we're doing? Oh, I don't have it stricken on mine. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. I'm glad we're asking this. All right, should I read it off of here? Okay, so number 1, work with legislators to develop clarification on the relationship between the board and the future contractor to administer this program, and research yeah, would you just do that for me? Okay. That would be good. It would just be that 3 and 4, those 2 pieces were added or changed, however that worked. Are we ready? Okay, so, and someone tell me if I'm wrong. I hope you're all following so you can help me. Request that, let's see, work with legislators to develop clarification on the relationship between the board and the future contractor to administer this program. Seek a legislative change during interim on services delivered during a hybrid environment requiring physical attendance versus the statutory intent for completely online learning experience open to all students as described in code, and or moving this hybrid approach out of the SOEP program to its own line item for clarity and specific guidance on the implementation and rename the private school portion and keep the homeschool portion with USBE, and request staff continue work on the existing statutory required SOAP RFP unless or until the requirement is amended by the legislature. Okay, and we'll start at the bottom this time. Chair Moss.
Actually, come back.
Okay, Board Member Wood.
Yes.
Board Member Straight. Board Member Rill.
Real is a yes.
Board Member Norton. Yes. Board Member Lear.
Yes.
Board Member Carey.
No.
Board Member Hymas.
Yes.
Board Member Hart.
No.
Board Member Green. Yes. Yes. Board Member Earl is a no. Board Member Davis.
Yes.
Board Member Klein is not here. Board Member Booth.
Yes.
Board Member Bogus.
Yes.
Okay, I need to come back to Chair Moss. Okay, and also who else? Board Member Green. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Do you have 9? So there's 9 yeses. There are 1, 2, 3 noes. Those are Board Member Earl, Board Member Hart, and Board Member Carey, and 2 abstentions, which are Board Member Green and Chair Moss. Okay, next item. Right? Anyone want to correct me on that? Okay. Next item was the prioritization of board legislative funding requests. I have to change this over to someone else because I got to make the motion.
Okay, or do you want to take it? You too.
I mean, I can, I just don't have a paper.
It's right there.
All right, we are at the prioritization of board legislative funding requests. Do we have a motion?
I have a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
The motion is to amend our critical needs staffing to add internal audit critical needs funding request. And the request was, what is kind of the bare minimum we need? Originally it was asked for several individuals, and this is to ask for 2. So that's the request. 2 FTEs for 3.
Okay, hold on.
164,000. Are you following
So
me?
the motion.
I would second that.
Thank you. All right, the motion's been made and seconded. Do we have the motion clearly? Okay, we will.
Yeah, it would be to add to our, oh, okay.
It's not really though. So
Yeah.
can you show the legislative priority request list? Because it amends what's already on the list. Is that draft 7?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is the current one.
Okay, so if you can kind of bigger that so we can see what it was. And then the motion is that, is to change it to requesting additional staff to assist with the critical functions of 2 FTE. Is that correct?
Yes. And I can speak to that. There's just a couple things. One of those is that the asks within USBE should be combined together. And we asked USBE to actually, about 6 weeks ago or so, just say what is the critical stuff we need. That's what I did with internal audit. What is the critical things we need, knowing that there would be probably some limitation on with the funding from this year. So this is the request here. So.
Can you scroll over to what the request, do we have the request total originally?
The number of people and stuff?
No, so
It's
that
supposed to be on
changes
there.
the request from
Oh, there it is.
724 to 364, is that correct? Is that what you were intending?
No, it would have to be 1088, so 1 million and,
Oh, it goes the other way.
because you're adding the full capacity. Does that make sense? You're adding to what we're already requesting.
Oh, we're adding 2, we're not reducing.
Yeah, and I guess probably the motion would be to remove it would need to be to remove the bottom as well, right? If this passes, it would need to remove yes, Scott, am I?
Just, well, Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones, so just for clarification, just so we're tracking in support of the motion, is it to add 2 FTEs to the already established critical FTE?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes, so if this passes, the consequences, and maybe I need to build that into the motion, someone could tell me if that's right, would be to remove the request of the audit that's lower.
As part of the overall motion?
I think that would need to be the case.
Okay, yes.
Because the consequences
Sure.
would be that.
Sure, okay, and so that helps us, and I think helps Angie.
Did that get the clarification?
Yes, yeah. Now, as far as the amounts go, if the motion were to pass, we would calculate those, and make sure.
And
to
then
do
just
it.
update it accordingly?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Oh, I was looking at the wrong number. If this passed it would add that onto it. Sorry, I was looking at 724. I don't know where 724. Oh, okay. Okay, got it.
Okay, so
I would need to amend that though too, unless there's an objection.
I'm seeking clarity. Are you putting the separate line item into the USBE critical needs?
It
So
would
that
be part of it.
It would be all one critical needs, but
Yes.
it doesn't change what was asked for in number 7.
That would need to be removed.
Okay.
It's not 7 though.
Oh, what was it? I thought.
Yeah.
Do you want me to put that in the motion?
Yeah.
And repeal?
Yeah. And then,
And
well,
Madam Chair, or who's chairing?
Me.
Okay, Madam Chair. So we would just use the amount of money for number 7 to do that and just confirm that and make sure if the motion passes.
it would be the amount of 2. The amount
Correct.
in there is more than that because it.
Right.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
yeah, so we would revise that and
Yes.
then do the total for the request
passes.
in there. So Deborah and I would do that, if
Okay.
it passes.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Audit, yeah.
Okay, so from what I understand, originally, the audit critical needs had 4 positions, or 4.5, or somewhere thereabouts. This drops it to 2 and adds it to the other critical needs for the agency. I believe that's, because I completely misstated. So now can we go to the motion and see if the motion reflects that intent? Okay, the second on the motion, are they still good with it?
That's Christina, I think.
Yeah, Member Bogus, are you good with the motion?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, any other lights? Board Member Carey first, and then Board Member Lear.
Just 2 points of information. One, I know historically the top 10 items were considered our legislative priorities. Is that still the case? Because I remember at our last board meeting, there was either a vote or a discussion about maybe the top 7. I just want to make sure that the top 10 are the board's legislative priorities, and then I'd like to see the list of the top 10 items if that's the case. If it's the top 7, I just need to see the top 7 items.
motions, 7, 8. Well, I'm not, huh? Look, yeah, that's probably where we ended up. It might have back.
The list of the top 10 it was top 10 that the board ended on, and the list of the top 10 is in backup and currently on the screen. It's the GS 2025 funding request tracker draft 7, which shows the WPU at the top, and then goes down to number 10, which is educator supplement programs, followed by the list of those priorities that were, or not priorities, funding requests that were supported but not prioritized by the board.
So 10 including WPU. So
10 inclusive of WPU as the number 1, correct. So WPU plus 9 additional.
Member Carey, does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay. Member Lear?
I have a question for the maker of the motion, I think.
Okay.
No, I mean,
You
I
think,
do.
are you wondering
I
if I'm
do
the
have a
maker of the
question.
motion, or?
I think
Okay.
it's most appropriate for the maker of the motion.
Okay.
There we
Yeah.
go. And it's actually a two-part question. First of all, I heard you say that kind of interestingly, maker of the motion, that I consulted with Debbie and decided that was her desire to add this,
No,
these
I
two.
don't
Did I hear it
know.
wrong?
I asked her, what is the most critical functions that you need?
Her perspective, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And she said two?
She said this would help in meeting those critical
Okay.
needs.
And then the second part of my question is, if, like last year, the legislature only funds 2 positions, how do we determine if the USBE positions are funded or if the audit positions are funded?
How have we previously done that? Because we previously not got the full funding, so.
But we never had really 2 distinct areas that were combined, as I recall.
We had, I was gonna, okay, Scott can maybe answer that.
Deputy Jones.
Yeah, so to Madam Chair, to
Deputy Dodd.
answer Board Member Lear's question or address her concern, our experience has varied in the past, and here's what I mean. So the board in the past has gone, say, for 10 FTEs. In some instances, we've received a particular amount of money towards FTEs, but no specificity on what that money is intended for. So that's happened in the past too. In the past years, though, there has been that critical FTE need, and the board has decided to combine it, right? And then, obviously, as we have reported to you, or think we haven't always received, there's been instances where we received no money for what was identified as critical FTEs. So then it becomes more of a decision on your part on, do you keep them separate and then prioritize them if the money is available? But it's difficult for any of us or staff to say, subject to the superintendent weighing in on this, on exactly how we would get funded for it, because we have experienced what I just described in the past. Does that help
Okay.
answer?
It does, and I just have a
Okay.
final follow-up comment, and that
Sure.
is, go ahead. It does answer it for me, Scott.
Okay.
Is that good? But my final follow-up comment is it makes me a little uncomfortable because the board would then, it would be, I don't want to pit the board against the superintendent's staff, but the auditors of the board's employees or Debbie's employees versus the superintendent's employees. So that makes me a little troubled about what we do. All money's good money, so we'll maybe just duke it out in the end.
Well,
but-
wouldn't, and maybe this is a question to ask, wouldn't you would, even if this was not connected there, you would have to still, meaning superintendent, would still have to make decisions on, we won't do a UPAC person, and we won't
Sure.
do this person, we won't do that person. It would seem to me that in this case, that there would just need, I think we would have to look at the critical need, and maybe it would go to finance committee, and maybe, something like
except
that.
We have never weighed in on the superintendent's hiring staff. It's been, the board has the authority to hire its staff, but the superintendent hires her staff. And I want to make sure that it stays that way. That's really important to me. But I also feel like the board would prioritize its staff over the superintendents. I'm just not sure. It creates an uncomfortable situation for me, but again, I guess I would say all money's good money, and so we'll figure that out when it comes to pass, or whatever comes to pass.
Okay, Member Bogus.
Ma'am, I don't think I have anything to say.
Oh,
Is my hand still up?
yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I don't know how to,
It's okay.
take that down again.
It's totally fine.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for offering.
Member Davis. Is your light on? Member Davis?
Yeah, I just have a question. If
Oh, okay.
if this passes, I mean, is there an understanding that if all of the FTE are filled, that they'd be filled? But if, say, a portion of them are filled, that the one that has been prioritized above gets filled first, and then as there's enough, the next one for audit comes in, and then the next one for audit if it comes in?
I don't think there's been a prioritization.
Well,
I don't-
it's number 2, isn't it? The critical needs for USBE is number 2 in our list. Am I right? Or do I remember wrong?
I'm sorry. I thought you meant within the, we could,
How many FTE did we request in that one?
We couldn't find it on there.
Was it 4?
It's not in the chart.
5.
Did we request 5?
5, so then we would
So
go to 7.
So 5 would go to 7. Let's say they fund 6. Would these that were prioritized number 2 be filled first, and then the audit be filled in on number 6, and then that one would drop off? Or would one of the ones that was prioritized on number 2 drop off and audit would go above?
so we can make that decision and put it in the motion. It doesn't specifically state or give that direction. So if that's important, I think that amendment would need to be made it either needs, if it matters to us, and we don't believe the legislature is going to make that distinction, and it does matter, and if it does matter to us, then we need to put that in the motion so that it's clear. That would be all I have to offer on that.
I mean, just to make sure, I guess. Is there an interest in that? If not, I'll just let it go, but,
I'll make that amendment.
okay, then, I'll second it.
Okay, whoa, we don't have
I'll
an
second that
amendment yet.
invisible amendment.
Well,
An amendment is in order, Member Straits. Please state your amendment.
that we rank the funding with the superintendent staff being funded first, followed by audit. Does that work?
That is a motion, so do we have a second? Do you have does anybody feel that maybe it should say, in addition, if the legislature doesn't say otherwise?
That would be friendly, if
I-
that clarifies.
I
That's-
just,
We don't need to put it, because if they say otherwise, it is what that is it.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
That's fair.
I'm good.
That's fair.
I would just say, and I speak only for myself, that when I ranked, and I did rank that very high, I can't remember exactly where,
Sure.
but I did emphasize that staff as being, in my mind,
Okay.
why I voted that way. And so I want to stick behind that.
Thanks for speaking to your motion. Anyone else want to speak to the amendment? Seeing none, then as soon as it's up, we'll vote. Oh, we're not using those today. All right, so yes, to restate the motion amendment, Member Straight's amendment is that the board amend the motion above to direct that the first 5 FTE requested by the superintendent have higher priority over the last two internal audit FTE if less than 7 FTE are funded. All right. Yeah, that is correct. All right, Member Bogus?
No.
Member Booth?
Yes.
Member Klein? No. Member Davis?
Yes.
Vice Chair Earl? No. Member Green? No. Member Hymus?
No.
Member Carey?
No.
Member Lear?
Yes.
Member Norton?
Yes.
Member Reel?
Real is a yes.
Member Straight?
Yes.
Member Wood?
No.
Member Moss?
No.
And I am a no, so that is... Okay, that fails with 7 noes and 6 yeses. So we're back to the underlying motion. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, I need to read off the yeses. The yes is Booth, Davis, Lear, Norton, Reel, Straight, and Member Klein is absent. Okay? We're at the underlying motion. I see no lights. That means we are ready to vote on that one as well. What's that? Eight noes. Yeah, I'll correct the vote. It's 8 noes and 6 yeses and 1 absent. All right, so the underlying motion is that the board amend the critical USB FTE needs funding request to add the following in addition. The Internal Audit Department is requesting 2 additional staff to assist with its critical functions. 2 FTEs equal 364,000, and repeal the internal audit critical function capacity funding request. All right, we will start. Member Moss, Chair Moss,
Yes.
sorry.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
No, because it makes sense. I thought we had a technical error.
Okay, all right. Member, Chair Moss, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Member Wood?
Yes.
Member Straight? No. Member Reel?
Real is a yes.
Member Norton? No. Member Lear? Okay. Member Carey?
Yes.
Member Hymus?
Yes.
Member Green?
Yes.
Vice Chair Earl?
Yes.
Member Davis?
No.
Member Klein is absent. Member Booth?
Yes.
Member Bogus?
Yes.
And I am a yes. And coming back to Lear.
Yes.
And Lear is a yes.
11 yeas and 3 no's.
Okay. 11 yeses and 3 noes with Davis, Norton, Straight with noes, and Member Klein absent. All right, so that passes. Next, are there any other motions? No. We're done, right? All right, now that concludes our unfinished business.
Oh, we have another motion.
We do? Okay. And we can add.
This is something that was, it was my error yesterday. I did not read this into this motion in, and we need to address it today. So yesterday in the Finance Committee, this is item 4.2. We did direct staff
to work with the legislature to seek funding for the office specialist for the school land trust. That was taken care of. The part that was not taken care of was the bullet point just above there. That bullet point reads, and the motion before the board is to direct staff to consider and make recommendations to remove requirements through legislative code changes and rule changes to streamline the responsibilities of school community councils.
Okay. Normally, I would restate that motion, but
Do you have that from yesterday?
I'm on it right now, but what I don't know is what did pass and what didn't pass. So it sounds like you said the second bullet did pass.
The part with the direct staff did, that one we read and was voted on. But the previous one did not. Was not read.
so the motion on the floor then, that came out of committee,
Came out of committee.
okay, was to direct staff to consider and make recommendations to remove requirements through legislative code changes and rule changes to streamline the responsibilities of school community councils. And that doesn't require a second because it was out of committee. And so, any questions, concerns?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go, Vice Chair Earl.
Yeah, so what does that mean? I mean, what is it that is
So
so out of sync that we need
The
to streamline
School
it?
Land Trust Committee is trying to update their processes, and there are some things that they needed to have adjusted through legislation, and this was one of them. They want to adjust some of the things that are happening in the school community councils so that they're a little bit more streamlined, and they have the ability to bring them into the office here and enact, do whatever they need to do, especially where it comes to those plans that are written up. And so that's what this does, is
Okay,
it just
I
changes
yeah, I was
how
just
those
trying to seek
plans
some
are.
clarification. Is it because we've put, and you may not know, I'm not asking you to answer this. I'm kind of throwing this out there, and I realize we may not have Paula Plant here, but is it because over the last 4 to 5 years, we keep adding more and more and more and making it, the community council has become a catch-all for anything anybody wants? Is that what I'm understanding?
Is that what we're understanding?
Well,
Yes, that's what we're understanding.
Okay,
We've
then
had a
I'm
lot
for
more
that. I just was like, I don't know what that meant,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
when you think of the amount of money that, and how that has grown over the last few years, and will grow hopefully with the amendment passing even more, but even without that, these plans are very, they're very large. They're taking everybody a lot of time. And so this would just allow for it
Okay.
to get to the nitty-gritty.
Okay, I'm good with that. I just wanted to make sure I understood what the intent was.
Fair. And I would agree. Oh, okay. All right, any questions pertinent to this? All right, seeing no further questions, we'll move to a vote. Member Bogus,
I'm going to abstain.
Member Booth,
Yes.
Member Klein is absent, Member Davis, left, Vice Chair Earl? Yes. Member Green? Okay. I'm a yes. Member Hymas?
Yes.
Member Carey?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Member Lear? Uh-huh. Member Norton? Yes. Member Reel?
Yes.
Member Straight? Yes. Member Wood?
Yes.
Chair Moss?
Yes.
Okay. Member Green? Member Lear?
Yes.
Okay. Are you still an abstention? Okay, okay. All right, so that 10 yeses, 1 no, and 2 abstentions. The abstentions were Member Bogus and Member Carey. The no was Member Green, and Member Klein is absent. All right, do we have any other motions?
I was a yes.
Oh, thank you. Wow, that was quick. I'll amend the vote. The vote is 11 yeses, 1 no, 2 abstentions, and 1 absence. Thank you, Member Davis.
I have a question.
Sure.
And it may lead to a reconsideration of a vote, because
Okay.
I may have just learned something because I will always say I don't know a lot.
Sure. Okay.
In terms of the vote in the prioritizing the 2 critical audit funding,
Yeah.
I thought that USBE would have the ability to, I want to give them the ability to manage their funding, not us direct it. But
Who do you mean by they?
the agency.
Oh, okay.
But I am just talking to Carol, I'm trying to understand, is this 2 different divisions that we have? Is there the superintendent and then is audit? Are they 2 different divisions? And so there is a clear and concrete separation of funding, separation of duty, separation of who hires and fires?
Okay. I'm going to, Deputy
Jones.
Superintendent Scott Jones is raising his hand.
Yes, so I would like to try to address Board Member Wood's question at your direction, Madam Chair. So the way that it's set up, and I believe Chief Audit Executive Davis is sitting behind me and can confirm or correct me. Chief Audit Executive Davis's position reports directly to the board. So the board is responsible for the hiring of that position. All other positions are subject to the processes that we take place with the superintendents, and those go for the positions within audit, right? So that's the hierarchy, well, the process, if you will, or how it's established in the bylaws. So for instance, my position reports directly to you, and so you're responsible for the hiring and firing, which I hope never happens, to this question of this position, right? So that's where it is. But the positions that I oversee are actually the superintendent's, or under the superintendent's position for final approval of hiring and those aspects too. Does that help answer Board Member Wood's question?
Yes, so to clarify, by not dictating how those funds are spent, if the legislature was to come back and give us FTEs, the superintendent will be able to determine how best to use that funding. Is that an accurate restatement of your?
So Madam Chair, if I may, and so the way that I read that motion that was made, my answer to you would be no. Because, so let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, we'd asked for, just for the sake of argument, $1 million for FTEs. The legislature appropriated $200,000, just as an example, just for the sake of argument, towards our request of $1 million for FTEs. They didn't specify, though, that $200,000 had to be used for a particular FTE. So when that happened, we, as the superintendency directed by the superintendent, decided which position should get funded with that $200,000. I mean, I'm just using that example. That actually happened, but my numbers are much higher, okay? So the way that I read this, or that Scott does, I could be wrong, is the interpretation is that if we go forward, and you propose, the board proposes X amount of dollars, which to me is above the 905 now, it's like 1 point something, which we'll confirm, and the legislature would to take the approach of what I just described, we would have to come back to you and say, well, okay, we asked for $1.2 million. The legislature gave us $500,000 and did not stipulate what positions that $500,000 had to go for. Just that, and sometimes the governors, and kudos to them, have supported board requests for FTEs, but haven't explicitly said, well, we support these particular FTEs that you're asking for. So the way I read how that motion is right now would be that we would need to come back to you for the board to decide if that scenario would to occur to do that. But I could be wrong in my interpretation of that. Am I over? So thank you. Does that help, Madam Chair?
Does that help answer the question?
Well, I don't see how that, we added that to it. It's a single amount. So where in the motion that we passed would it say they'd have to come back and get our,
Just by virtue of the fact
says
we have,
superintendent?
we'd
we
have
would
to.
still have
We-
to make the decision. So it will come back to us regardless. The way we said it, we can still decide where we're at with the input from the agency as to where
Yes.
they
Oh, okay.
want to prioritize
Yes.
those. Okay.
Yeah, if I may, Madam Chair, all the positions that we're tracking that the board could potentially send forward to the governor's office and then subsequently to the legislature are under the superintendent. So, okay. Okay.
They are not under our purview. They are under the purview of the superintendent.
Correct. Yes.
All right.
You are.
CEA Davis has something?
Chair, may I make one clarification? So Chief Audit Executive Debbie Davis, one clarification with the internal audit positions, because we're required by Utah Code to follow professional standards, which require us to be independent of management, which would be the superintendency. So we can't, I guess, so there's kind of an administration and a functional, so just making sure that that clarification is understood, that internal audit is and is required to be by Utah Code, we have to be independent of daily operations of the agency. So as long as
Yeah.
that's understood, but yes, as far as hiring goes and everything, we follow the same process.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, did not mean to imply that it was
Yeah,
all
no,
one
thank you.
agency.
Yeah, thanks,
That
Debbie.
would be
Yeah,
a
no,
major
you're
faux
right.
pas.
Yep, thank you.
The staff is all under the superintendent. However, they make their decisions as a department independently of the decisions made for the agency. In the work that they do. Hiring belongs with the superintendent.
But not Debbie.
Correct. Debbie is not the superintendent.
No, she's not hired by the superintendent, the board.
No, her staff is under
Gotcha.
the
That's-
jurisdiction of the superintendent. However, when they do their work, the people assigned under Debbie's area do their work independently of the agency. All right. Whew. So you're okay now? Okay. Did we have any other motions? Okay, I'm out.
Okay, we have a couple items left. First, some strategic planning discussion, but we have folks from our safety crew who are here, and we want to give them time. So I don't think, again, we are going to fully wrap up the discussion of goals, but I will say this. Chief of Staff Young put together a great presentation that we're going to defer to double back to where we started, and she helped us start this process a while ago. So I have a great mission and vision. We have some goals that have been proposed by the committees, and we're open to further discussion of broad goals. And then from there, it goes down into the strategies, the SMART goals, all the stuff that actually makes this happen. So one piece of business that's important to turn to before safety is the finance proposed goal. I say the finance proposed because it will govern the finance committee, but it's a board approved goal. We did law and licensing yesterday, did standards and assessment about a month ago. So could I turn to Chair Norton to present? Are you heading out? It's up there. Okay. I'll present. Okay. We had a good discussion about each of the other committees. We actually discussed finance quite extensively a while ago. It's probably in 2 or 3 months. We thought we had gotten it approved, had a vote. Turns out we did not. So to complete that series of committee-sponsored goals, we need to put this before the group. And I will just make the motion then, I guess, if that's okay. I'm as a finance committee member and board chair.
Here,
Chair
I'll
Norton-
make the motion, then you don't
Chair
have to.
Norton's, well, I'm
Oh,
in
okay,
finance,
Chair
so
Norton.
she's appointed me, so I'm gonna say, the finance committee recommendation is that the board supports transparent, efficient, and educationally effective use of funds. And we discussed each of those. I will just say briefly, since it's a committee motion, I think I can just speak directly to it. Transparency was critical. The public needs to see where the tax dollars are going. Efficient was to use it for its intended purpose, as streamlined and accurately as possible. Educationally effective was the idea that at the end of the day, those dollars should contribute to student success in some way. educationally effective. So that's just kind of a restatement of what we had a pretty good half-hour discussion on last time. With that, that is the proposal from Finance. Any discussion to that motion? I don't see any, so frankly, we can just vote. All right. Well, let's vote. Are we doing a roll call? Do you want to run it? Member?
Yeah.
I'll start with me. I guess, I don't know, start at the bottom. Chair Moss is yes. Member Wood?
Yes.
Member Straight?
Come back to me.
Member Reel? Member Norton? Yes. Member Lear?
Yes.
Member Carey?
Yes.
Member Hymas?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hart?
Yes.
Member Green? Yes. Vice Chair Earl?
Yes.
Member Davis?
Yes.
Oh, she's here, yes. Member Klein? Member Booth?
Yes.
Member Bogus?
No.
And so I think we skipped Member Straight. Member Straight's a yes. That passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 to 1. Member Bogus being a no and 2 absent. So again, in the interest of respecting our safety crew, we've been discussing, I think there's the opportunity to talk about that level of goals. We've got 3 now that have been proposed by committees, approved by the full board, that can guide those committees in what constitutes academic and organizational excellence in doing their work. And we have the opportunity to come back and revisit whether we want to have other top line general goals. And I will say, I'm going to take 30 seconds. We've had some discussion. Are these focus areas? Are they goals? They're not SMART goals yet. Well, below this, we go into the weeds working with staff to develop those measurable SMART goals, whatever you want to call them, right? Strategies and then measurables. So I think we're well positioned to do that. If we want anything more on that top line, we're in a position to do that. I was noodling around on this question is, are these goals or are they focus areas? And I actually found that in strategic planning, some groups have used a term of focus goals. and we can call them what we like, but that seemed to me to capture what these are. They are statements of focus as to what we do and how we aspire to do it, but they are not yet SMART measurable goals. So I think we've done good work at that level. We can talk about whether we want more, and then it turns from there to implementation with our staff of strategies and SMART goals. So with that, unless there are any comments, I think we've got some really good work here and a little bit more to do, and we'll turn to our safety folks so we can respect their time. Seeing no lights, thanks for that, and let's turn to who's running the show on the safety discussion. Chantel.
And I know Rhett's here too.
And Rhett's
so
here. Let's see.
They probably were like, it's going to be another half hour, but are they out in, someone want to check? Because I know Rhett drove up from Manti to be here. Yeah. They didn't expect us to be done at that point. They're like strategic goals. It'll be, let's go to dinner. And we'll be back. So. I like ours. I like it where they landed. Yeah, but you guys, you've got. Well, and you have pieces Yeah. Chantel.
All right, Chantel, thank you very much for joining us to discuss safety. And I will just turn it to you to lead the discussion and let us know when you'd like to stop for questions or comments.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Chantel Cota, Director of School Safety and Student Services. Very happy to be here with you today. Thank you so much for your time. And apologize, I thought you might be a little bit longer in your last agenda item. So thank you for welcoming us here today. So I'm here to share some school safety updates. For those of you that were in standards and assessment earlier today, we had the pleasure of being recognized. When I say we, I really just need to turn it over to my amazing team. They put together a school safety playbook, which we'll talk about a little bit later today in this presentation. And so I just want to make sure that you all were aware of that and got to be part of that celebration as well. And thank you so much for the amazing cookies. They were so delicious, so thank you so much. So we'll go ahead and get started. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So we have 3 learning outcomes. We're going to talk about the scope of work at the School Safety Center, as well as funding updates and a data review for you today. So the first thing I'd like to go over, next slide, please, includes the new structure of school safety and student services. So again, I'm the director of these amazing teams and just want to talk a little bit about the structure to make sure that we're all on the same page and just to give you all a better understanding of the work and how the work is curated among the teams. So we have 3 teams under school safety and student services. In student services, we focus on areas such as school-based mental health, school nursing, school counseling, and behavior. And that team is led by Chrisanne Lewis. She is a new hire. We are super excited to have her. She is the coordinator. The next team is the School Safety Center, and that is led by Rhett Larson, who is up here with me today. That includes USBE staff, as well as a liaison from the Department of Public Safety, liaison from the Office of Substance Use and Mental Health, and also a Safe UT liaison. So that Safety Center, which we'll talk about a little bit more further down in the presentation, consists of collaborative partners with outside agencies, including USBE personnel. And then our other team is prevention, and that is run by Tanya Albernaz, another name I'm sure you're very familiar with. And in that team, we work with gang prevention, restorative practices, suicide prevention, and the protective factor framework. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the School Safety Center. In spring of 2019, the Utah State Legislature passed House Bill 120, and that's what got us started with the School Safety Center. As I mentioned, this is a group of professionals from the Utah State Board of Education, as well as our partner agencies, the Utah Department of Public Safety, the Utah Office of Substance Use, Mental Health, and Safe UT. Next slide, please. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about the scope of work. Next slide. So the mission of the Utah School Safety Center is to work collaboratively to provide technical assistance, training, and resources that support local education agencies' commitment to ensuring school safety and improving the climate of school communities. The vision of the Utah School Safety Center is that each student learns in a safe and healthy learning environment, and that kind of goes along with our strategic plan as well. I want to talk a little bit about some of the school safety legislation that really guides the scope of our work and guides what it is that we do to ensure the safety of our students and staff across Utah. So we have House Bill 120, which I referenced earlier, which includes the student and school safety assessment, and that is what pulled together the Utah School Safety Center and has propelled us into what we are today. We have House Bill 61 that was passed in 2023, which started school safety requirements, and that was sponsored by Representative Wilcox, as you may recall. We have House Bill 140, which is the standard response protocol to active threats in schools, and that provided schools the opportunity to use common language around threats to provide more safety measures in the school and to provide an opportunity to share language on threats across agencies for faster response time. And the legislation that is the hot topic right now is House Bill 84, which was passed in 2024, and that includes school safety amendments. Next slide. Part of our scope of work also includes professional learning. That includes professional learning for us as members of the School Safety Center, as well as school safety and student services. And then also guiding, as I mentioned, that technical assistance and professional learning for LEAs. One of the, I think, really important pieces of professional learning that we as USBE staff, liaisons, and legislators were able to partake in is a tour of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. As you may recall, this is the site of the tragedy in Parkland. Several of us went with some legislators, and we were able to tour the building before they tore it down to really witness the effects of that horrible day and to learn from that tragedy so that we can do everything in our power to prevent anything that horrific from happening in Utah. We had some really robust conversations with legislators in the state of Florida, as well as with the legislators who were able to accompany us and USB staff and liaisons, and brought some of that information back to drive our work at the Utah School Safety Center. Other trainings include Utah School Safety and Security Specialist onboarding and technical assistance training. As you may recall, every school in the state of Utah is required to have a school safety and security specialist in their school on their staff. This person is responsible to help with things such as the emergency response plan, standard response protocols, and other policies and procedures that are locally driven. We take a lot of time to really make sure that we are sharing all of the current policy updates with those folks, as well as technical assistance and training to help ensure that they have all of the information and all of the resources that they need to be most effective at their school and site. We've also offered safety school panels, as well as school safety town halls and Utah School Safety Conferences, which I'd like to talk a little bit more about. Next slide. So we have had two school safety conferences, and I'm just going to go over the most recent one because I think many of you have heard about the first one, but the most recent we had was the 2024 Utah School Safety Conference, and I want to share a couple of highlights. This really was a collaborative effort for school safety. We worked with many partner agencies, as well as Michelle Gay from Safe and Sound Schools to help really ensure that we had the right sessions for our folks. We had over 840 registered participants from 33 school districts and 65 charter schools, as well as participants from multiple state and local agencies. And if you look there to the side, you can see attendance by role to kind of give you an idea. So you can see our highest number of attendants included school administrators and then the school safety and security specialists, as well as mixed in with teachers, mental health professionals, also county security chiefs and others, and also did have support from board members as well. Thank you for those of you who were able to make it and join us for that. We had 4 local resource booths, including Safe UT, which is one of our partners at the School Safety Center, as well as in the state, as well as 18 exhibitor booths. We were able to offer 26 LCSW DOPL CE, so that's continuing education eligible sessions for folks. And then we did have sessions on all areas of school safety, including how to conduct a school safety needs assessment. And we had a full session on the standard reunification method. So this is part of the standard response protocol, and this allowed a school, we were able to use a school down the street to facilitate and practice what a reunification method could look like that day, and that proved really valuable for folks to be able to come in and get some live training on what reunification could be. Next slide. Just to give you kind of a taste of what the conference was like, these were some of our keynote speakers. We had Jermaine Galloway. He's a national expert on drug and alcohol in the schools, and he talked about concealment trends and identifiers, ways to identify drugs that may be coming in and out of the schools, and ways to help address that. We had Michelle Gay, as I mentioned. If you're not familiar with Michelle Gay, she had a daughter who was killed at Sandy Hook and has since been an advocate for school safety. And she talked about a comprehensive approach to school safety and gave us a lot of valuable resources and tools for that. Frank DeAngelis, he was the principal during the time of the Columbine shooting. He came and talked about leaderships and lessons from that day and beyond, and things that he's done with his staff in the aftermath of that tragedy. And then we had Molly Bradley Hudgens, who talked about Saving Sycamore, the school shooting that never happened, and she talked about reasons why and things that they were able to identify to stop a horrible tragedy at that school. So just to kind of give you an idea of things that we're offering to our educators across the state. Next slide, please. As I mentioned in standards and assessment earlier, my wonderful team was able to be recognized for the Utah School Safety Playbook. You all have access to that. This playbook came from a need from LEAs to really want to understand and want to move safety efforts forward in a way that is manageable and helpful for them. And we at USBE certainly want to support our leaders and specialists in that area. And so Rhett led a team in pulling together all of the legislation that I mentioned in a previous slide and looking at those relevant pieces for schools and turning it into a playbook. This is version 1. We will be offering version 2 probably after the next legislative session when we see things that are coming out. But we plan to continuously update this book for our LEAs so that they have tools and resources to meet their needs. Next slide, please. We also value communication and want to make sure that LEAs as well as you as board members have information on school safety policies and procedures. So we do offer monthly newsletters. Thank you, Board Member Booth, for calling that out earlier this morning. I have the link here for all those of you, if you're not getting them, it is going to the board email address. So if for some reason you're not getting those, please let us know. Happy to share those out with you. And you're also able to look at all the newsletters that we've created. We try to really stick just to policies, practices, and we always are out engaging with the field and listen to their needs and try to find topics that we feel would be timely and relevant to our educators across the state. We also divide up staff to participate in monthly meetings with student service directors, the Utah School Superintendents Association when invited, and then of course we are part of the School Security Task Force Grant Subcommittee so that we can have a voice in funding and things that are happening there at the task force. Next slide, please. So with that, in the scope of work, we do have continued areas of focus, just for your awareness. We are looking always at those emergency response plans. We currently have a template for that at USBE, looking to update that to help support current needs in the schools. We want to focus on interagency communication for enhanced threat response. As you're all aware, unfortunately, we have been engaged with bad actors who have shared hoaxes and other things, and so we're working with Department of Public Service and SIAC to help figure out how can we communicate quickly and effectively with one another so that we can share that information as appropriate with schools and of course with all of you. School safety needs assessment is one that we're talking about at length. This year for House Bill 84, schools are able to choose their own school safety needs assessment, but we are working with Chief Pennington in future years to have a standardized needs assessment that will fulfill those requirements. And so we're working closely with him and his staff to make sure that school voices are heard and that we are following that legislation for those minimum safety requirements that are identified in House Bill 84, things such as single point entry, fencing, and there are other lists of requirements I'm happy to go over if that's helpful. We're also talking a lot to rural areas. We've actually made several trips down to the Blanding Bluff area. And when I say we, that's my school safety center, and we want to really understand the needs of those schools and meet with them. So we've been invited to do a tour of some of their buildings to talk with them about some of their unique safety needs, which include barriers to communication, barriers to resources, and other things to make sure that we are tailoring technical assistance to support them. Of course, we work with any of the grants that come our way to make sure that we are supporting schools with having access to that funding. And then we also work on behavioral threat assessment, such as CSTAG model, to make sure that schools have access to those resources and training so that they can adequately identify threats and move forward in the appropriate pathway for the threat. And then, of course, I mentioned standard response protocols. Those are protocols that are enacted in the event of a threat and uses common language to help schools to be able to communicate with law enforcement and other schools and community members so that we're all speaking the same language. And then I mentioned the reunification piece. That's an area that we've identified that could use some help across our state. This is a very kind of intense process where we have an incident command center. Those of you that have followed some of the other tragedies, for example, Uvalde, we've noticed that there has not maybe been the type of command center that we would need for the reunification piece, making sure parents know what to do, students know what to do, and our staff knows what to do, and they feel safe and comfortable in the process of doing so. And so working together to look at best practices and support schools in that reunification piece as well. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about funding updates. Next slide. So I want to start, and I've set this up to give a little bit of a historical context, just to kind of remind us of where we are and bring us to where we are today. So as a reminder, we did have in fiscal year 24, House Bill 61 provided one-time funding for firearm detection software in the amount of $3 million. We were allotted one-time funding for school safety and support grant, and that was $72 million. And just due to a few points of note, because these grants have already closed and they've been doled out, you'll see that 210 schools received 100% of their requested amount, and 494 schools received at least 50% of their requested amount. So this money went to schools to support those minimum safety and security requirements. So we're looking at locks on doors, single point entry, fencing, cameras potentially, anything that the school deemed was needed to keep their kiddos safe. And then we also received ongoing funds for school safety and security specialists. This is that personnel that I mentioned earlier who is in every single school. So they get a $3,000 stipend to perform those duties, because they are duties above and beyond duties that they would normally be performing. And as well as we require that they come to our trainings, our school safety conferences and other things. And so we want to honor them with that. And of course that was, when I say we, I wish we could pay them personally, but that came through the legislation in House Bill 61. Next slide, please. I've mentioned the school safety and support assessment, and I think this is a thing that many of you as board members have reached out to me and some of my staff on, and you're wondering what is coming through in these needs assessments. So we are, to be clear, waiting on the newest school safety needs assessment, which isn't due until December 31st, but wanted to give you a little bit of data on the previous assessments. So when we looked at the needs from the schools in the fiscal year 24 needs assessment, these are some of the needs that came out. If you look here, I've broken it up into several sections. We have campus, communication, first aid, professional learning, and personnel. And you can see on campus, schools are wanting things such as keypads, cameras, single points of entry, safety film on windows. Some of you are familiar with the term ballistic windows, lock, signage, and fencing. In terms of communication, schools were requesting intercoms, two-way radios, emergency apps. First aid needs included things like Stop the Bleed and AEDs in the classrooms. And then the professional learning they were seeking included threat assessment and active shooter training. Personnel includes any security, and then contracts with local law enforcement when necessary. So those are some of the things that came out in the last. We're, as I'm sure many of you are, eagerly anticipating the next safety needs assessment so that we can gather this data and share that with you as well. Next slide, please. Again, I won't harp on this too much, but the school safety and security specialist is an individual that's inside and designated for each school. As I mentioned, they do receive a $3,000 stipend for every school's designee, and they are responsible for supporting safety initiatives. It cannot be a principal according to legislation, and the reason being is because the intent of the legislation was to ensure that principals have support and that they have someone else who is helping to oversee the safety of the schools so that principals can focus on academics and the many other things that they're asked to focus on. They are asked to complete training by the state security chief, as well as the training that the Utah School Safety Center brings together. And then they also work with the county security chief to conduct and utilize that school safety needs assessment. So this person is really actively involved in school safety at the school and is a communicator of those needs. Next slide, please. And then these are just some additional requirements of that school safety and security specialist. I think the important thing on this slide here to note is that they are part of the school's multidisciplinary team. So this individual is not expected to do the work alone. I want to be really clear on that. This individual is meant to work with a multidisciplinary team to help educate and support the principal in ensuring a safe and healthy school environment. Yes, please, yes.
Is this for every school?
Yes. Yes, it is every school. Great question, thank you. And also, just to add on to that, in recent legislation, now every district also is required to have a school safety and security director as well. And so that's in every district or charter. So that person will help support and manage those individuals as well. Yes?
If we're asking questions.
Oh, and I'm sorry, board, I did not ask for your permission to answer.
It's all right. Is it okay if I ask?
Of course.
Thank you.
Is there any follow-up? I mean, do you require a name from every LEA, or is you don't follow up? I mean, you do follow up in that you ask for a for them to submit a name, is that right?
We do, yes. And mostly for our end, it's for training. We want to make sure that they are getting all of the training that they need, that they are up to date on all of the policies and procedures that are happening across the state, and that they know they're on our listservs and they get our newsletters and things of that nature.
Okay,
Yes,
thanks.
thank you. Great question.
How are they paid this $3,000? Does that come through here or through their district?
It's set up through a grant form, and so what happens is the district will reach out to us, they will submit the name, and then we provide them with that $3,000, and then they go through their processes at the district to dole that out. Yeah, great question, thank you. Any others? Okay, so I just want to kind of loop around, so I'm on slide 19. Thank you so much, Kelsey. So the firearm detection software grant, just want to kind of give you a timeline with that. So we started with, in December 2023, if you remember, the board approved the contract and we've moved through that grant process. Applications were reviewed and we provided money to districts based on those applications. And then in July of 2025, the grantees will send up a follow-up summary to the Utah School Safety Center so that we can better understand what they utilized, how they utilized it, and happy to share that information with you when we get that as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so that brings us then to the school safety funding for fiscal year 25. So House Bill 84 has come along, and that's the amendments basically to House Bill 61. And we have a couple of different pots of money. And so 98.7 million of the total amount will be used as follows. So 50 million goes to general grants to local education agencies. Now, this is prioritized by the School Security Task Force, the State Security Chief, and the Utah School Safety Center. So this money, we have not done anything with it because we're still having conversations with the task force in terms of how they want to prioritize that money and things that they want to put that money towards. We also have 48.7 million for the school safety and support grant. So that's similar to the grant we had previously, in which schools will look at their school safety needs assessment and then they will submit requests based on their needs. We have not started that one because the needs assessments aren't due until December 31st. So we anticipate rolling out the application in January, February, once we get those needs assessments in and we hear more from the task force.
Yep. May I? Director Coda,
Yes.
how many of our LEAs have submitted their grant requests? Although they're not due till December, how many of our LEAs have submitted those?
Thank you, great question. They haven't submitted grant requests, but they have submitted their school safety needs assessment summary. My last count was 30. That may be inaccurate as of today. That was as a couple of days ago. I'm checking in with my data analyst, but we have about 30 at this point.
And
yes.
And out of the 30, and I don't know, would it be appropriate to ask in total the funding requirement associated with that?
We just don't know yet because we're waiting to get all of them in before we pull them out together and kind of see what they're looking at. So I don't have that information for you yet, but happy to provide that as soon as I do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, of course.
Can I, one quick just clarification here. You got a breakdown of the amounts. What's the total that was actually allocated through HB 84? Did you already say that and I missed it?
The 98.7.
Okay, it looks like of the total amount. So that is the total amount. 98.7 is what was funded by the legislature through HB 84?
Kind of, for us. And then there's the 1.3 million that goes to the Department of Public Safety to cover things like vehicles, equipment, systems, and so forth. And so the Department of Public Safety oversees many school safety components as well.
Okay, but that was the amount that was allocated. I didn't know it was that high. I knew that we've had that number. That was allocated by the legislature in connection with HB 84 was the 98.7.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Can
Thank you.
And can I just get a clarification on the 50 million? Though that's going to be grants to local LEAs. I thought that fell under other. Am I wrong? Like, I thought half of it went to other services.
It can. It depends on what
they're choosing to do. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's happy.
Yeah, it depends on what the task force decides, and so we're waiting to hear some decisions on that. there are different pathways they can follow.
So we don't know yet.
We don't know
It's
yet.
a possibility they could, okay, because I was under the understanding the 50 million didn't necessarily come to us. It could have been, but it could be other entities. It hasn't been decided on. That will be decided on by the task force?
Correct.
When will that be decided?
They are currently, so they have two things going on. They meet monthly, and then they have the grant subcommittee.
Yeah.
And so we anticipate that once we get the school safety needs assessment, they will use that data to drive their decision-making process as well. And so I think we're all really on hold until that date, which is December 31st. And
Okay.
then we'll start looking at the grant subcommittee, which, by the way, Rhett and I are part of the grant subcommittee. So we're waiting for those to come back. And in January, we'll review all of that data. And I believe that they're waiting for those data sources as well.
Perfect. I had understood it probably wouldn't go to LEAs, but now it possibly could. So that's awesome.
I had a question, Jenny. Is that good? Oh, I don't know who's chairing.
Who's running this? I think I am. You're on. You got it.
I think you are.
I maybe, go ahead.
I just wondered, given that
Yeah.
this money hasn't gone out yet, when do schools have to have all of this in place?
Excellent question. So with House Bill 84, there aren't a lot of dates associated with things. The intent is that schools will complete their school safety needs assessment in December, and then they'll work with their multidisciplinary team to make changes, make funding decisions, put those grants in, and then the following school year that they would have that opportunity to start implementing these things.
So not this school year, but presumably the next.
Correct.
Because I've heard from a couple of schools who are already getting estimates of costs and stuff like that, and they're very, very concerned because the costs are beyond what they think that they will have. So I'm just curious, but there's maybe another funding cycle possibly to help them with those costs, meaning from the legislature.
We all hope so, yes.
Although, it's competing with really important stuff too, so.
Yes,
All right,
I understand.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah. So obviously, we've had conversation with schools, and schools want their kids to be safe. We want the kids to be safe, and so I do believe schools are doing everything that they can to follow those minimum guidelines. Yes.
So last point of clarification, got 50 million for general grants, prioritized by need, determined by the task force, and then almost 50 million for school safety and support grants. Are both of those being held in reserve pending the completion of the needs assessments?
Yes, that is correct.
And they both have, and I'm sorry if I've missed it, but those are two different ways of getting money out to LEAs for this, right? These updates, one of which is determined and allocated by the task force. The other one is allocated pursuant to what? Legislative parameters?
Well, so the 48.7 million, so we have a grant subcommittee that's assigned to the task force, and they will ultimately make the decision, but the money is tied to the school safety needs assessment. And so what we'll do is we'll look at the data and then make some prioritization. So last year, to give an example and maybe to put it into context, last year schools could conduct a safety needs assessment, and then they would just reach out to us and say, we want this much money for cameras or this much money for fencing. And so this year we're looking at that past data as well as, and when I say we, it's the grant subcommittee, and then waiting to hear what this new data is that comes in to see if we need to prioritize funding for maybe one item over another. So we're waiting to see what schools are asking for, and then looking at those point costs to decide, like, this is the amount of money we have, how can we best support schools with opening a grant that would meet their needs?
So I guess, is there a difference in the allocation for the 50 million and the 48 million? The grant subcommittee versus?
So yeah, the grant subcommittee will look at the needs assessment and decide on that 48.7 million, which will go to likely the minimum safety requirements that are listed in House Bill 84. So again, we're looking at ballistic windows, fencing, single point entrance. The 50 million is going to be dedicated by the school security task force, so they'll vote on that.
So the school safety center, sorry, just trying to make clear which entities dole out the two items. The one is the school safety center, the other one is the task force?
Right. So you have the task force. So that's run by Representative Wilcox, and
Right.
and on that we have Board Member Carey and Dr. Norman as well. And so they will meet with the grant subcommittee, and then they will decide X amount can maybe come back to USBE and maybe support the 48.7 million. They may decide there's something completely different they want to fund with
That's out
that.
of which pot? I'm
That's,
sorry.
So
These both look the same to me. I'm sorry I'm
do.
so dense.
No, you're
I'm
not.
hearing a task force and the school safety center, right?
Right.
And they got 2 pots.
Right.
Is the same group doling out both pots?
No.
The 48 and
So,
the 50?
Well, as of today, no. So as of today, the school safety center will oversee the grant for the 48.7 million. Once it is identified where the 50 million goes, it is possible that the school safety center will oversee some of that money.
Who identifies where the 50 goes?
The task force.
Okay.
Yes, and that's board member Carey and Patty are members of that, as well as superintendents and DPS and others. Yes. Yes.
You are wonderful representatives for the other, but I'm worried about the education.
Sure.
But now that I know that.
Oh, Carol, could you use your mic? You're all done? All right, so the 50 million comes out of the task force, and the 48 comes out of the safety center.
Well, it came through legislative appropriation, but we
Right,
will
but I mean,
oversee the
who
grant
dis-
on
yeah,
that.
who divvies it up, allocates, reviews? Okay, so the safety center itself allocates the 48.7
Under direction of the grant subcommittee, though,
of the
to be
grant
clear.
subcommittee
Yes,
of the task force.
Yes.
And then the 50 is going to the task force itself.
Right.
And they may also get some of what's left over out of the 48.7. So that task force,
Opposite, just the opposite, yes.
All right.
Thank
But the task force itself, so the people, on it, which includes member Carey, they will be actually voting on how to allocate the 50 million? Okay.
Correct, yeah.
All right, gotcha. And the money that's being looked at for the next wave, so this 100 million is being held ready for distribution after those safety assessments come in December.
Correct.
100 million bucks in the can, in the bank, ready to go. And then we don't
Maybe
do we
100 million.
maybe. Okay, but it was allocated in the bill,
Yes.
correct?
Yes,
Okay. And
that
then
is
there's
correct.
other discussion about what might be needed in the next wave of funding through the current session. We've discussed that as a board, but that would be on top of the $100 million allocation that has already been held, if I'm hearing this correctly.
Madam Chair, or
Well,
Chair
there's a
Moss?
question about going to DPS. Yeah, Deputy
Yeah,
Jones.
so Director Cotto, will you clarify which organization Chief Pennington is in charge of?
Yes, so Chief Pennington is with Department of Public Safety. He is on the task force, and so he is a member of the task force, and he is the Chief of State Security Chief, rather.
Right.
And
Okay.
so that task force has 48.7 million, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the school safety and support grant. That line item goes to the task force
Oh,
chaired
no,
by
I'm
Chief
sorry.
Pennington.
No, sorry, the 50. It's the
Opposite.
opposite, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
All
it's the
right.
opposite. Okay, so 50 million with the task force, 48.7 with the school safety center, right?
Yes, I just want to be clear, though, it's under the direction of the grant subcommittee. So when the 48.7 is, yes, with the school safety center, but also we're taking direction from the grant subcommittee. The grant subcommittee consists of members of the task force as well as the school safety center. And I know that further confuses it, but
Right.
that's, so both pots of money have input from the task force, if that's helpful. The 48.7 will will go towards those needs assessment regardless of any decision that's made. The 50 million, we will see where that goes and based on input from the safety needs as well, and priorities that the task force identifies.
Okay.
So Chair, if I may.
Yes,
And this
Deputy
is really
Jones.
important for the field because we're getting a lot of questions about this. So is it that the 50 million, so the 48.7 million distribution is dependent on whatever does or does not happen with the 50 million? Or is it the opposite?
I'm sorry,
Well,
can you state that one more
there
time?
was some
So the
contingency
confusion is,
discussed,
so
though.
when can the LEAs expect that they'll get the first of the, so there's 98.7 million. When can the LEAs expect that they'll see the first iteration or process, if you will, of a distribution of funds?
So I think the best way I can answer that is through a timeline, which is that the needs assessment is due December 31st. The grant subcommittee will convene in January to review those assessments. Keep in mind, it's one assessment per school, and so I anticipate that's going to take some time for that committee to go through every single assessment and gather that data. So I would anticipate that the application for the grant would go out end of January, mid-February, and then from that point, schools would be able to apply for funding, and then the funding process would follow.
So on the timeline, Chair, which I think you were asking about, LEAs may not see a distribution of funds until February allotments or March allotments at the earliest. So, and that's what we've been telling the business administrators, which that's what their concern is the timing of all this and when they can expect that, so.
And are they obligated, expected to meet some of those needs they're identifying before they get any of the money? That's been a big question, right, of the unfunded mandate. So
Yeah.
as they're identifying these in connection with their needs assessment, at what point, do they have to do that with or without funding? Is it a question of whether they get funding? And then 'cause I would anticipate they're going to say, well, we got this most critical need, this secondary, this third, right? And some of that gets funded. Having identified three things, if only two get funded, do they still have to do all three, regardless of the incremental, addition of safety benefit?
So there isn't a date associated with House Bill 84, and I think the best way that I can answer that is that I believe that they're looking at that data. They want to see what schools are needing, and that will inform a couple of different things, including funding and potentially legislation for the next session. But as it currently stands with House Bill 84, the intent of the bill, as I understand it, is that schools should look at their safety needs and they should start identifying the needs that they have and then addressing any needs that they can currently, and then making plans for the needs that they don't have, whether it be funding or other barriers to addressing. They should start working with their multidisciplinary teams to make plans for that.
And I've got a couple other questions. I guess for me, the unanswered question is, they should. We're talking about mandates and whether they're funded or unfunded, right? And whether they're in trouble if they don't do it. And I would expect schools to be fairly aggressive in identifying needs that they would love to have funded. And does that identification get you in trouble if you don't end up funding it yourself, absent a grant? But I think you've answered that. It sounds like it's a little bit uncertain. I've got other lights going on here, so.
So what,
Oh, Deputy Norman or Vice Chair Hart? Oh, okay.
Oh. And Patty Norman, Deputy Superintendent of Student Achievement, I think the simple answer is yes, they are still responsible for those. And there shouldn't be a fear of identification because those are actually in statutes, those things that are saying that are prioritized, that they need to address. So there isn't a thing of getting out of it by not identifying it. Those things are in statute. Simple answer, yes, they are still responsible for those, whether they're funded or not.
Called out in statute, right? And are they allowed to identify things not in statute if they think it's something?
Yes, absolutely. So,
Okay,
yeah,
so
they
there may
can,
be mandates and, go ahead.
yes, yes, you're correct. They can identify any needs that they're building based on their local policy or using any. So this year they're able to, as I stated, use any needs assessment that they so choose. And so that needs assessment may identify things outside of, the House Bill 84 requirements, and they certainly should address those if they feel that that's appropriate.
which pot of money is guaranteed to go to schools?
The 48.7 million will go to address those needs assessments.
Okay.
One more, Jim. I've got it.
So the 50 could go somewhere other than to schools to make these improvements?
50 is at the discretion of the task force, correct?
Could it go somewhere else other than to the schools?
It could, so to give you an example, so if you look at House Bill 84, Chief Pennington has oversight of several safety items, and so there could be conversation around meeting some of those needs. So DPS could be an agency that could receive, the task force could come together and receive. They could get the needs assessments, and something like brand new could come, a data point could come from that, and they could make a vote to say, well, let's put all of that money towards one particular item. So it really depends on the data that they discover and the conversations that they have.
I guess my last question, I'll turn to other, is the money though earmarked for schools in whatever fashion that group might decide? You say one item, could that be for freeways? Could it be for prisons? Is the 50 million going to schools?
It's designated for school safety.
School safety,
So
okay.
that umbrella.
All right, sorry, this is complicated, thank you. Remember Carrie?
It is, yes.
Let me just, I have to say, I serve on the task force with Deputy Norman, and the only person that is asked to speak at every task force meeting is Direct Dakota. I mean, the only one. So this board is well represented and in good hands with the director. And I will say, even though the 50 million could be spent elsewhere, and it very well may be, my sense from the committee is that the reason the 50 million hasn't been spent or allocated is because we are waiting to see what these needs assessments, how heavy they are financially, and will a portion or all of that 50 million be needed to address the work that these schools are submitting in their needs assessment. It doesn't mean that it will go there, but I think that's why we're waiting to see what do these needs assessments say, how much more, and it will be. I think it'll clearly exceed the 48.7 million that has been allocated for that. But I think that's what we're waiting for. So does it have to go there? No. But obviously, Deputy Norman and I feel strongly that those funds should go in that direction. I can speak for myself, not Deputy Norman, but okay. Thank you.
Me. And here's my concern, and you can tell me if it's been considered, and probably I'm sure you would think of it, but that there's no mechanism to send money directly to schools. It has to go through LEAs. It's not going to be a problem for probably 90% of the charter schools and probably 2/3 of the district schools, but in terms of population of students, it's going to be a big concern because schools don't own the buildings the district does. They don't make the final decisions about building changes. Districts do. So is there an understanding that in a big district like Granite or Salt Lake, or that LEA is going to weigh in on how the money is spent in schools? Do they get that?
Deputy Norman?
Yeah, and Director Coda might have a more specific response. An overarching response is the needs assessment are done by school, and so that's how they apply for it, is by school. Then the LEA makes that determination in sending it out. So they couldn't bypass that, and correct me if I'm wrong, yeah.
Yeah.
So the LEA will have some final influence, and I get a little nervous that schools, that sometimes LEAs understand the needs of their schools, the LEA administration, sometimes better than the schools, that administrators turn over frequently. And so I just hope that the LEA has some influence on the bigger LEAs about how that money is spent and the final decision making. So you're assuring me that it does. I know you guys,
Yeah.
it makes me feel good that you guys
Needs
get it.
assessment by school, yeah.
But I get needs assessment at school, but
The money
LEA's
goes to
final decision
And
making.
then it should, be disaggregated out to the school level for them to be able to, go ahead.
Okay.
May I add to that as well? Yes, so I agree fully with Dr. Norman. Also, the LEA fills out the grant. So the LEA is going to be looking at their needs assessment across schools. So they can make some decisions there. So sorry if that was confusing or if I wasn't clear on that. And the other piece too, again, remember that every district or charter is required to have a school safety and security director. And that person will be working as well to kind of oversee some of these things as well, hopefully. So
One per school, but they're
And-
literally employees of the LEAs.
well, so you have one per school, and this year with legislation, there should be one at the administrative level as well that oversees everything for the LEA.
That makes me feel better as a practical distribution of all of this funding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Wood?
So in 84, the fiscal note said that this could cost the LEAs in aggregate about $22 million. Does that take into account the 50 million? Like if the 50 million all went to the LEAs, would that account for that? Or are we saying that it's going to be the 50 plus the 47 plus an additional 22 million? Do you know?
I just don't think we'll know until we get those needs assessments back. Yeah, I apologize. I wish I had the answer, but I think we will. The exciting thing about getting those assessments is that we will have some data that we can refer to.
And if I can add on to that, the increase in the number of schools, and then how many different measures did we have to increase that from before? How many different, we had a total of how many schools apply for the first level of funding compared to what they, to be able to do that statewide is the difference.
You mean
Yeah.
the average that we,
Yeah.
So we did a little averaging to kind of figure out where we may be in the state. And so we took the average that was requested per the school. And so the average requested was 102 million and some change. And so if we anticipate that 1,060 schools are going to apply again because they either need additional money or they have needs that weren't met, we're looking at about 108 million plus. To get those minimum safety needs. Now, does that address everything that they would need at the school? I don't know, but we're talking about those safety needs that were identified previously if we're just looking at data from that year.
One very tiny sum up. Is the intent then, if the estimate was 22 million in the aggregate, to cover those needs identified with the money allocated, including the 50 million, so that there's no unfunded mandate left out there? Is that the plan of the task force and the group that's holding the money?
Yeah.
Well, I'm asking what, if the aggregate was expected there and then you put $100 million to it. The bill says 22 million. The aggregate from last year's needs assessment says 100 million. That was sort of where the number came from, right? But is that the intent or no? I mean, I know you don't know yet whether it's possible because you don't have a needs assessment. But is that the plan? Is that the
But I
objective?
think this is the big difference, and I'm sure both Pat and Chantel will correct me on this, but last year it was, this is the minimum that you need to be ready. And that financial threshold was here. These requirements financially are substantially higher. So even though we say we took this baseline and we averaged it, I believe we're averaging it on a lower cost. I think these items will be substantially more money. And again, we'll know December 31st, but whether it was the intent to have this cover it, you'd have to ask the legislature, but will it be enough? I don't think so. Will it be close? Yeah, I agree with Board Member Booth. I don't think it'll be close. These items are like, they just talked about ballistic glass, and the cost for ballistic glass is just phenomenal.
Yeah, I understand. That's what I understand. And some of these are above the basic, which was what last year did. And so it's another layer beyond the basic minimum, and yet some of that still might be an unfunded mandate, I guess is what I'm hearing, right? And we hear that, but this is the opportunity to quantify and make that specific. Sorry? Yeah, got it. All right, thank you. I'm trying to clue on the intent, the likelihood of meeting it, what level of basic security plus extra, and whether that's going to be, I guess the other piece is what happens if you don't. If you've met the basics using last year's, and you're not able to get funding for something that would make you safer but is beyond the basic, what happens? And I've heard there are things out there about what could happen to you if you identify a need, because we could always make it better, right? That's always the desire. What happens if the funding is not there, they've met the basics last year, and they don't do the extras? Do we know what the ramification is for schools?
So that really is under the purview of Chief Pennington and DPS, and I think those are conversations that are still ongoing.
Okay. All right, anybody else? I thank you. I've asked a lot.
Yeah.
Member Booth.
So it seems if you were just talking with people out in our LEAs, in our schools, among our constituents, there is a level of negativity regarding this whole scene that is, I personally feel unfounded. I understand that because they don't know a lot and because they do feel that we're not funded, we're underfunded, and that it's a critical need, that there would be a tendency to move towards negativity. This is ridiculous. And so we've heard it all. And especially during this campaign that I've been a part of lately, it's just been like this deluge of people about school safety. But I think we are so lucky to have this group of people and Deputy Superintendent Norman and Board Member Carey integrally connected to what is progressing along the pike. And I have, just listening to a report like this and already having seen the work that's going on a day-to-day basis within the agency and by extension from the agency out into the field, into our local districts and charters, I feel very positive. I don't think it could really be, given the circumstances, that really couldn't be any better, and it's only going to get better from here. So I feel so excited to know that we're taking care of business and in a very straightforward and somewhat methodical. We're going to take it as it comes, step by step. We're not going to get overexcited about what we can't do right now, but we're going to do everything we possibly can. And I just want to compliment you and thank you for the work that is going on, and express gratitude on behalf of the board that we have a chance to work with these kinds of professionals who are going to diffuse and help us maneuver and negotiate around those barriers that could make safety for our children less possible. I think you're thinking ahead, you're thinking smart, and once we get the data, we're going to do everything possible, and there's no question. I mean, there is absolutely no question that there's going to be more needs. And Representative Wilcox knows about that and is well aware that we're going to have a lot more money, a whole lot more as the years continue. But that's just the price of living in today's world and keeping our kids and our educators and staff safe. So thank you, and I'm just very enthused and hopeful after this report, knowing that we don't have all the answers yet, but we're going to get the answers as the time moves along. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Member Wood, sorry, you're.
Oh. I just wanted to follow up on that. I had the opportunity to attend the second, both of your safety conferences. And then I weighed in on the town hall that you had recently. And, we had the two links where if it reached 300 that you had to go to the overflow link. And I was a little bit late, so I maxed out on the town hall, but I went to the overflow link. And I was so impressed by the level of questions. And I just want to speak to those that are out in the field. The questions were very, to see that there were hundreds and hundreds of our boots on the ground asking really sincere questions like, how do we make this work? What do you want us to do here? They are our state educators, our stakeholders out there, they are intent on making this work and trying to do their best. And I wanted to thank you for the work you're doing, but also thank those that are out in the field that are just trying to comply, just trying to do their best. I don't know that I've attended something, both the conferences, that just had so many people. Tell us what we need to do and let's figure this out. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
I don't think we even let you get to the end of your presentation yet, did you? Back to you,
Okay,
Director
thank
Coda.
you. I have a few more
Thank
slides.
you for allowing the diversion. Now, go ahead. The floor is back.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Happy to help. And thank you so much for your comments and questions. We certainly appreciate all of you as well. So I just wanted to conclude with a data review and share with you a couple of data sources. So two data sources that we use at the Utah School Safety Center include the 2023 School Disciplinary and Law Enforcement Action Report, because I know many of you have already asked. The 2024 disciplinary report will be published November 11th. And so the data I'm sharing with you today is from the 2023 report. The 2024 report is yet to be published, but November 11th, stay tuned for that. But this report fulfills requirements for the School Disciplinary and Law Enforcement Action Report as per UCA 53E-3-516 and R277912. And it also ties into the bullying and hazing requirements from UCA 53G9606 and R2776613. You can all access this report on the website. And as I mentioned, I apologize, there's a typo on this slide. We have since met since I created the slide deck, so it's not the end of October. Please know it's November 11th is our due date. The other data source that we use includes the school climate survey data, and this is in accordance with Utah Code 53G-802, and this is the state board shall create a model that schools may use to assess stakeholder perception of school environment. So I'm going to talk about both of those just briefly here. So next slide. Oh, thank you. So the School Discipline and Law Enforcement Action Report is quite lengthy, and there's a lot of data to cover, but I wanted to highlight one that we are actively working on at the School Safety Center, which includes the counts and percentages of incidents by incident type for school year 2023. So as you look at this includes all of the incidents that we track at USBE. Schools may track others as they so choose. But if you look here, the top three include other, disruption, and truancy. If you're like me, immediately when I saw this report, I thought, how is other the top reported? And so that, the scientist inside of me decided to discover more about that. And so we're working with our 3A strategic team, and we have done a deep dive. We've been in this for over a year now. And just to give you an idea of what we've done, we're identifying barriers to incident reporting, and we're trying to understand what would entice or inspire an LEA to select other, because there's a reason if that's the top chosen data point. And so what we've done is we've reached out to local education agencies, and we've also looked at federal code as well as state code, and we've aligned our current definitions to make sure that there is clarity in the definition to remove that barrier. And most recently, we are right now involved in focus groups with LEAs. So we invited LEAs to participate in focus groups to go through each of these incidents and provide feedback on the data as well as the use and the practical application in their schools. And so once we get that data back, we will use that to inform technical assistance out in the field and perhaps maybe add some clarity to these definitions moving forward. So stay tuned for the next School Discipline and Law Enforcement Action Report, and we can review that data certainly when it comes out. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about the school climate survey. It does provide data to support LEAs in adopting a plan for harassment and discrimination-free learning. It helps with parental outreach, and it helps, schools are required to send a notice to each student, parent, and LEA staff member that the LEA has a commitment to maintaining a school climate that is free of harassment and discrimination no later than September 1st of every school year. And so many schools do use their school climate survey data to help support decisions to make policies that do support a climate that is free of harassment and discrimination. Next slide, please. This is just an example of some of the data that we can access, and you can all access this data on Utah Data Gateway as well. This is just a slide that was pulled. So for example, one of the questions asked, does bullying take place in any of the following areas in this school? And you can see here that 3rd through 5th grades reported that, yeah, 59% of the time it does happen on the playground. Whereas 6th through 12th grades reported higher reports in hallways and school property and so forth. And I share this with you just so that you, if you're not familiar with this data point, again, you can access this on the Data Gateway. But when we think of school safety, we're looking at 3 things. We're looking at culture, climate, and security. Those are 3 areas that we try to pull together into a cyclical approach for school safety. And so the climate data gives us a little window inside of what's happening to our schools. Next slide, please. So I wanted to kind of conclude with data gaps and next steps. So some of the data gaps that we're hearing from LEAs as well as some of you as board members is one around standardized incident definitions. So LEAs have reported a need for technical assistance and support in common incident definitions. As I mentioned, the top reported category is other. So we are addressing that data gap currently with those focus groups and moving forward with clarity in the definitions. Some schools have asked, as have you as board members asked about the standard response protocol. So as a reminder, this came from House Bill 140, and the protocols are hold, secure, lockdown, evacuate, and shelter. We do not track this data, and this is just for your awareness, in case your constituents are reaching out or anybody is asking, how often are our schools in hold or lockdown or shelter? We don't know, because they don't report that to us, and we'll have parents sometimes call and say, I heard that my school is in lockdown, and I just refer them back to the school. We have no reporting mechanism for that. So again, just sharing that with all of you so that we're on the same page and that we're aware of the data that we are and are not gathering. Next slide, please. Other data gaps include the Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guidelines, otherwise known as CSTAG. So this is the model that many of our schools are using, that we train on at the Utah School Safety Center. It tracks transient threats, or rather it identifies transient threats, substantive threats. We do not track this data either at USBE, and so if anyone's asking for this data, we do not track that. Schools may have records and should have records of that using the CSTAG model, but it's not data that we track at USBE. So just want to share that with all of you. And then school climate data, statewide data will not be available moving forward because schools are not required to participate in the school climate survey that the USBE offers. So that's not to say that schools won't be gathering school climate survey. In fact, we've had several LAs reach out and want to still participate in the USBE model. Other schools will be going in their own direction and potentially using other tools to track school climate. But just so you're aware, the use of the data gateway will not provide statewide data. Rather, it will provide data on schools that are participating.
So it won't even provide, even with an asterisk, not everybody takes it?
Sure, yes, we will gather any data that, so any schools that choose to use the school climate survey, we will continue to track that data, and it will be available, yes, with some type of a disclaimer.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
Thank you so much for that question. And then just to clarify again, to talk a little bit more about that school safety needs assessment, and I've touched on this several times, but just to reiterate, in fiscal year 24, schools can select from an accredited assessment, and I apologize for the typo, but in school year 25, schools will use a standardized assessment as well. And then just to conclude, and next steps, we will continue, meaning the School Safety Center, with technical assistance for LEAs with the Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guidelines, the Standard Response Protocols, Emergency Response Plans, and Reunification Plans, making sure that they feel supported and have the opportunity to come together around those different resources. Again, exploring systems to support interagency communication for enhanced threat response. Reviewing data sources on Utah school safety measures, so making sure that we understand the pulse of safety in Utah so that we can plan appropriately. Reviewing and studying local and national best practices for school safety, and then of course supporting schools with those school safety needs assessment. The link for those assessments has gone out, so as I mentioned, we have about 30 at this point, and we'll just keep continuing to connect with schools to make sure that we get that data in timely. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any lights, questions, comments? This could open up a huge thing, but I'll just ask for a 30-second answer. Do you see any of those data gaps as being critical to be closed?
I will tell you that at the School Safety Center, we do, so again, just to kind of frame this, so the three things that we look at when we're looking at school safety, and this also coincides with conversations we've had with DPS and other agencies. So we look at culture, climate, and security. So when I say culture, so that's the way that we do things. Climate is the way that we feel about the way we do things. And then security is the way that we operate a building and that we make sure that we have those ballistic windows and fencing and all those different things. So those three things come together to create a safe learning environment for students. So anytime there is data that helps us to make decisions around technical assistance or supporting LEAs in things that policies, model policies, and things that we can provide is helpful to us.
And I guess a 10-second thought. Everybody's looking at me going, you're standing between me and dinner. Are any of those that are maintained at the local level not kept at the state level just because of an interface issue, an entry issue? We've been talking a lot about avoiding burden on gathering data around here, but I'm just always curious, is part of that a system question, an operability question, why there are certain pieces of data at that level that's not coming here?
Or
Yes, yes, there are a lot of
Operability,
factors.
privacy,
Yeah.
what's
Schools have different systems that they use. We require, as per legislation, that certain data points, come to USBE, and so those are the ones that we track. But schools certainly, as per their local policy, can track their own. I mentioned like the bullying and hazing policy earlier. They have to have something that informs those policies. So it can be, for example, the school climate survey, or it can be, another survey that helps inform them of climate at their school. But it just depends on, the tools and mechanisms and policies that local schools want to follow.
okay? And Vice Chair Earl, I guess in terms of threat assessment, we're doing some more of that, aren't we? Gathering additional data, or is that more just happening at the district level?
So we don't gather any data on threat assessment. That the
Okay,
purpose
that
of
doesn't come to us for privacy reasons, or?
it's just not something we've been asked to gather.
Okay. Vice Chair.
And my comment would just be that some of this data, when you're talking bullying, incident type things, it's very private data. So it'd have to be high level for it to be of any value for us. But it would be of great value for local schools, knowing where they're seeing bullying incidents within their school, right? Just to kind of keep things, the discipline and the behaviors there. I guess that's what I'm thinking, but.
Yeah, student-specific data would.
Student-specific, yeah, but that would be, the bullying data would have that, that's, yeah.
All right. Like I said, that could go for hours, but I think we see no lights suggesting that. People are very happy with the presentation. Thank you for indulging all those questions and for all your hard work.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. That's okay. My nieces and nephews are waiting with bated breath. I get to take them to a haunted house tonight.
Oh
Yay
my
me.
gosh.
And
Thank
it's
you,
still
thank
light
you.
out, so.
All right, thank you.
I know, so yes, please proceed if you would like.
Let's just let her.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we're looking for one final motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. Thank you to our staff, for the public for listening in. Have a great weekend. See you shortly.
Thank you, Chair.